Hey Guy, today we're exploring the origins of games. There's a magic hidden in every human heart, the ability to turn the simplest objects, a stone, a stick, a leaf, into a game, a miniature world where we can transform, dream and connect. But what journey brought us from those humble beginnings to the modern games we know today? Listen through the entire story of this history to find out. If you enjoyed it, please like, share and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating tales. Chapter 1. When humans play with earth, stones and time. Before there were glowing screens, before fingers ever pressed controller buttons or clicked a computer mouse, humans played. Not to win, nor simply to kill time. They played simply because they were human. Games, those that appeared even before writing. There is a truth both sleep-inducing and fascinating. The earliest games appeared before people knew how to record anything in writing. That means when we trace the history of play, we do not follow texts, but rather the stone slabs, engravings and traces buried beneath the dust of millennia. A classic example is Senet, one of the oldest board games we know of. Ancient Egyptians played it more than 5,000 years ago, long before the pyramids arose. This game consisted of a wooden board with 3 rows of 10 squares each. The pieces, often small wooden or stone tokens, were moved in ways we still do not fully understand. Perhaps they cast sticks or used a primitive form of dice. But the most remarkable aspect is not how it was played, but the feeling experienced while playing. Senet was carved on tomb walls, depicting players smiling or seated before divine figures. Perhaps for them, play was not mere amusement, but preparation for the afterlife, a ritual, a journey. Slowly, steadily, they moved each piece as if testing each step in an invisible labyrinth of fate, smooth stones and boundless imagination. Leaving Egypt, we arrive in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates. Here, clay tablets record the vague rules of a game called the Royal Game of Ur, another board game that may be even older than Senet. Its gameplay might resemble an ancient version of Parcheesi. Players move tokens along a zigzag path, avoiding perilous squares and hoping to roll favourable results on dice. What is even more intriguing is that those dice looked very different from the familiar 6-sided kind. They were 4-sided shapes like tiny pyramids. Often players simply use stones or seeds and improvise rules on the spot. A game that might never play out the same way twice. This is the beauty of early play. No need for how-to instructions. Only imagination and a bit of free time. Playing in sand, among stone walls. As humans journeyed from plains to deserts, from jungles to highlands, they carried games with them. In ancient Greece, children played with marbles and hoops. They threw, pushed, rolled and challenged each other to see who was fastest or most skillful. Adults played knucklebones, placing bets that sometimes reached personal possessions. In Rome, games like Ludus Latrunculorum emerged, a tactical board game believed by many to be an ancestor of chess. Roman soldiers carried small boards on their backs, and during long campaigns, they would sit on rough stones and begin silent battles of wits. No fanfare, no spectacle, just small moves on a weathered wooden board. In the stone cities of the Maya, archaeological evidence reveals the ritual ball game, where players used hips, knees or shoulders to strike a rubber ball through stone hoops mounted on walls. This was not merely sport. It was sacred, even lethal. Sometimes the losers were sacrificed. A single play could be a wager of life itself. When games mirror society, games were never merely pastimes. They reflected the societies that created them. In ancient China, Liubo was played by the elite, with complex rules that remain only partially understood today. In India, Chaturanga arose, the direct ancestor of modern chess, as a way to train in tactics and simulate warfare. Also in India, snakes and ladders, originally Moksha Patamu, carried religious meaning. Snakes symbolised downfall, ladder's spiritual ascent. Players were reminded that each move embodied karma. In Japan, Go, a game simple in its rules yet infinite in strategic depth, was seen as a form of mental cultivation. Monks, generals, and philosophers played it as a means of reflection. From simple amusements to complex contests, from laughter to matters of life and death, all reveal the essence of humanity. Games as a human instinct. Imagine an afternoon more than 3,000 years ago. A man sits on the ground, using a stick to draw squares in the sand. Opposite him, a child laughs as they toss a small stone into one square, and the game begins. No language needed, no paper, no batteries, only the desire to play. From that instinct, the first games were born. They were not bound by technology, only limited by imagination. They allowed people to connect, to practice, to compete, and sometimes simply to remember that they were alive. Morning sunlight glides across ancient pages, carrying the soft scratch of a brush pen on bamboo slips or paper. For the first time, games were recorded in writing, though sometimes only as a few brief lines tucked among the strict laws of the royal court or chronicles of the imperial administration. In ancient China, characters did more than record history or classics. They paused to describe how to arrange game pieces, how to cast Lubo dice, or notes on a carrow board challenge between officials. Each stroke of the brush felt like an invitation, revealing scenes of all strata, from emperors and ministers to merchants, turning to games as a respite amid the wheels of fate. In Rome, where tombstones bore the names of generals and slaves alike, some even depicted two hands moving pieces on a small portable board. Along the long avenues where chariot wheels rolled steadily, soldiers would pause, open wooden boxes containing latrunculi boards, and settle onto stones for a quiet contest of strategy. Amid brutal battles, Romans found in games a moment of calm, challenging the mind while soothing a soul stretched taut like a bowstring. In medieval Europe, as castles were surrounded by moats and swords, people turned to portable games. Woodcarvers and ivory craftsmen began producing small game sets, sometimes a carrow board, other times a plain plank for drawing boundary lines. Games no longer belonged only to courts. They filtered into marketplaces, roadside huts, even the sickbed of an injured carpenter. Games became commodities, a small souvenir imbued with the excitement of competition and shared empathy. The flourishing spirit of the Renaissance elevated games into art. On marble chessboards, nobles displayed their tactical prowess, while commoners embraced the first printed card games. Delicate illustrations on each card, encapsulating a little story. Card play was more than diversion. It underpinned social gatherings, where polite conversation mixed with bursts of laughter. From this period emerged the concept of rules of play becoming standardized, printed in books, binding every participant to follow them or risk being deemed a cheat. Moving into the 18th and 19th centuries, as mechanical printing spread across Europe and crossed the Atlantic to America, games entered mass production. The Italian game of the goose became a sensation. A spiral printed board on sturdy cardboard, instructions in English or French, a dignified box, everything made the game a true family pastime. In Philadelphia, the Mansion of Happiness was regarded as America's first board game, printing moral counsel interwoven with each move, reminding players that every square taught a life lesson. Laughter echoed through homes as parents and children cheered, ascending the ladder to heaven, or shuddered at the snake of downfall. On long candlelit nights, people did not play merely to kill time, they created memories. When Mostajos, games were wrapped in paper boxes and became gifts. They also served as bonds between generations. Grandparents spoke of the old days when boards were hand-drawn, parents shared their special methods of casting dice, and children joined in with bright excitement. Then the Industrial Revolution changed everything. Toy factories proliferated. Alongside traditional board games, fortune teller machines appeared at fairs. Insert a coin. The machine whirred and returned a card forecasting your future. Games no longer fit solely within human hands. Small mechanical contraptions began to bring surprise and a touch of magic to play. Billiards also became an icon of leisure in that era. Large tables where balls glided smoothly over deep green cloth produced a steady, soothing sound, like the slow heartbeat of a tranquil afternoon. People reclined in wooden chairs, chatted, then looked up to observe the next move. On street corners, cafes began installing billiard tables, inviting wanderers to sip black coffee while enjoying the subtle control of the cue ball's motion. As electric lights began to illuminate streets, games entered a new chapter. Not only cardboard boxes, printed boards or billiard tables, but increasingly complex mechanical devices. Bells, cranks, springs, all combined to create tempting experiences, drawing players in with flashing lights and jingling music. These inventions paved the way for the video game era, where the feel of pressing a button would replace the roll of dice. Thus, in the winds of change, games ceased to be only a legacy of the past. They carried the imprint of culture, of technology, and of humanity's ever-growing aspirations. From boards carved on bamboo slips to printed maps, then to fortune-telling machines, each step in their evolution guided us closer to the electronic dreams yet to come. Morning electricity seeped through streets and alleys, banishing the darkness once lit only by oil lamps, and games began to transform into an entirely new form. Instead of wooden pieces, clay tablets, or billiard tables, now there were electronic circuits and geometric tubes flickering by the second. People no longer rolled dice by hand. Machines generated random numbers. A small movement of a finger pressing a button, and the video game was born. They say that in the late 1960s, in a cramped laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, two students together wrote Space War, one of the first computer games on a black and white screen. Simple dots represented spacecraft flying among star symbols, firing at each other in digital space. There was no sound except the steady hiss from the CRT display, like the first breath opening the electronic door to the world of play. Just a few years later, when RCA and electronics companies began experimenting with connecting circuit boards to home televisions, the concept of press start started to spread from labs into living rooms. In 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey appeared, a barely open doorway into a hazy realm with square pixels dancing on a black background, projected through an overlay placed on the screen. Countless small plastic tokens and screen decals gave players the sensation of stepping into another universe, even though that universe existed in only two simple colours. But it was Pong, the simple arcade machine with two vertical paddles and a dot bouncing back and forth, that truly sent America into a frenzy. In cafes and arcades, the plink sound, each time the ball hit a paddle, echoed, and eager eyes were glued to the screen. Though it only simulated table tennis, it carried a magic. Anyone could pick up a controller and feel the drama of the match. Arcades were not the only venues. Street fairs featured claw cabinets with joysticks and buttons. Neon lights shone on excited faces, and electronic music drifted from small speakers on the night breeze. Children stood beside parents, dropped a coin, and immersed themselves in shooting aliens in Space Invaders, or blasting falling stars in Galaxian. Cheers whenever a high score was reached, and sighs when a turn ended, became inseparable parts of that era's memories. Gradually, people brought those large cabinets home. The Atari 2600, with its dark cartridges resembling large memory cards, turned living rooms into electronic arenas. The beep beep and boop sounds became the soundtrack of family evenings, as parents and children vied for turns in combat or adventure. Each cartridge was not only a game, but a small story carefully packaged, sparking imagination for hours on end. Meanwhile in Britain, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64 put video games in the hands of tech-savvy youth. They loaded cassette tapes into machines, waited for the blinking load prompt, then typed, basic commands swiftly to summon pixelated shapes slowly appearing on a monochrome TV. In study corners, the click-clack of keys blended with the low hiss of the hardware, forming a mechanical symphony that guided players deeper into programming's labyrinth. And then creators did not stop at simulating sports or shooting. They infused entire imagined worlds. Simple arrays of squares suddenly became alien planets. Dancing pixels became bizarre creatures. Tiny lines of code in a computer became storytelling in light, evoking adventures, horror, or humour. CRT screens, once reserved for broadcasting television, became portals to countless other worlds, activated by the first beep when a player touched the controller. On arcade and console platforms, gaming communities also began to form. Gamers clubs emerged where members shared tips, recorded high scores on honour boards, and even challenged one another face to face. Video game magazines with reviews, strategies, and comics inspired by pixel characters became indispensable reading for anyone wanting to keep up with the latest trends. All of this did more than change how people entertained themselves. It shaped culture itself. The flickering light of screens, the twinkling electronic music, and the feeling of guiding one's fate within digital space made video games a quiet revolution, permeating families, friend groups, cafes, and small fairs alike. And when we look back along the path from dice carved from animal bones to cartridges plugged into televisions, one thing becomes clearer than ever. Games evolve not only through technology, but also reflect humanity's relentless desire to create and connect. Every CRT screen with dancing electron beams continues the lineage of sand traces inscribed on ancient bamboo slips. Both share a single instinct: the desire to play, to share, and to dream. Chapter 2: When the 8-bit spark lit the living room. One afternoon in the early 1980s, the fluorescent lights in the game store seemed more alive than ever. On the shelves, fragile boxes printed with modern computer characters, Mario running and jumping over Goombas, a ninja crouching to dodge shurikens, gradually replaced the old sets for Caro or chess. This was the moment when the 8-bit era officially poured into living rooms everywhere, bringing with it an entirely new mode of entertainment. Every story began in Japan, where Nintendo was determined to revive the video game market after the crash of 1983. Rather than flooding consumers with thousands of unchecked titles, they focused on creating the Famicom, a compact, warmly red and white home console, paired with a strict licensing system. When Famicom launched in Japan in 1983, few expected it to change the landscape. Yet within 2 years, over 2 million units were in homes across the country. Crossing to the west, its name changed to the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. And in 1985, those crystal-like boxes and rectangular controllers began appearing on American store shelves. No longer a luxury reserved for tech enthusiasts, the NES became part of family life. Parents could easily hook it up to an old black and white TV, press the power button, and let children explore the digital world. The click of a cartridge being inserted, followed by the crisp beep-boop sounds, immediately had kids lining up for their turn. Competitors rose to the challenge as well. The Sega Master System arrived in Europe and North America in 1986. Its sleeker design and unique 7-button controller attracted tech fans. Yet it was the duo of Mario and Zelda on the NES that forged irreplaceable icons. The plumber in his red cap leaping across blocky platforms, and Princess Zelda awaiting rescue in a distant castle, igniting a spirit of adventure in young hearts everywhere. In that living room scene, parents sat nearby with cups of coffee, watching their children deftly guide characters through each level. Comic books and textbooks lay momentarily forgotten. The new storybook was the flickering CRT screen, and the controller in hand felt as soft and intimate as a nighttime moth's wing. The melodies, those simple chords imprinted deeply in memory, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da of Super Mario Bros., or the triumphant trumpet fanfare when Link opened a dungeon door in The Legend of Zelda. Programmers began to explore the power of the 6502 and Z80 chips, crafting crisp pixel shapes like treasure maps. Limitations in colour palettes and audio channels forced unprecedented creativity. A sprite might display only 4 colours. Sound had 3 music channels and 1 noise channel. Yet these strict constraints became boundless inspiration. Every stage, every soundtrack, every collision effect was meticulously refined, akin to a craftsman carving intricate wood grain. Competition heated up. Groups of friends gathered at someone's house, bringing pirated cassette tapes or grey cartridges, discussing how to conquer secret levels or sharing tips to outmaneuver enemies. Video game magazines emerged, scoring games featuring glossy full-colour covers, constantly introducing new titles and printing step-by-step guides. It was a world where every magazine page and every afternoon in the backyard echoed with laughter and exultation at achieving a high score. From that pixelated castle, the 8-bit era deftly paved the way for 16-bit. But before stepping into the next generation, promising smoother graphics and livelier sound, the 8-bit legacy established a deep imprint. Anyone, young or old, whether in Tokyo or New York, needed only a console, a controller, and a spark of curiosity to embark together on wondrous electronic journeys. The glow on CRT screens flared more brilliantly, like electronic stars dancing beyond the imagination of the 8-bit era. A new generation began with a leap forward in colour and sound. When the Sega Genesis controller first revealed its 6 buttons, young fingers sensed the difference immediately. Each press produced the warm chung of the Yamaha YM2612 chip, heralding Sonic's rapid dash through lush green worlds. Amid vivid colour palettes and driving music, players discovered speed, a sensation faster than the eye never experienced before. Soon after, the Super Nintendo emerged with its rainbow logo and gently curved controllers. Just a little more, people whispered. Cinematic quality graphics are coming to the living room. Indeed, when Super Mario World gradually unveiled its intricately patterned blocks, and the fairy tale Mushroom Kingdom sprang to life like a painting, the world changed. No longer just blocky shapes, but smooth curves and soft shadows. The music produced by the P700 chip, familiar yet arranged with subtlety, evoked a sense of nostalgia, like a lullaby from childhood. In that space, role-playing games exploded. Developers wove narrative and gameplay together to create journeys lasting dozens of hours. When Link opened Hyrule's gates, a piano flourish sounded like an ancient whisper. In Final Fantasy VI, urgent melodies and dialogue punctuated with deep emotion. Everything conveyed through tiny pixels drew players into worlds of tragedy and hope. Each command menu and line of dialogue appeared slowly, like turning pages in a book, reminding us that games were not just for entertainment, but also for experiencing a story. At the same time, in Europe and Japan, the PC Engine, TurboGrafx 16, quietly sowed passion with faithful ARCD ports, CD-quality audio, and bright colours. Though its market share never exploded, this platform paved the way for later optical disc usage. Video games began to breathe like cinema, with cutscenes, extended soundtracks, and even voice samples. Competition among companies fueled a relentless innovation race. TV advertisements showed pixel heroes leaping over chasms, then cut to excited children's faces. Busy parents still paused, looking on as their child battled 16-bit foes. Cheers at high scores and sighs of regret when lives ran out formed a symphony of joy and the urge to conquer. And in this era, games ceased to be mere moving blocks. They became doors to countless worlds where speed, narrative, and music intertwined, enabling humans to adventure across time. When we removed the cartridge and turned off the console, the light in our minds lingered, a promise to return, to grip the controller and press power once more. The glow of arcade lights dazzled as CD-ROM cases first glinted in players' hands. The optical disc, thin yet containing vast worlds, became the emblem of the next technological leap. Instead of cartridges limited to a few dozen megabytes, developers could now store hundreds of megabytes of data, full-channel music, pre-rendered video sequences, voice acting, and expansive 3D spaces. In 1994, when the Sony PlayStation debuted, the entire industry seemed to awaken. Pixelated blocks were no longer the ultimate limit. Thousands of polygons combined into characters, environments, and shimmering light effects. Players gripped the DualShock controller for the first time, pressing its smooth buttons and feeling each subtle vibration. Metal Gear Solid unveiled a cinematic narrative with spoken dialogue and tense musical cues, guiding the player through stealthy steps in the dark. Crash Bandicoot bounded through tropical forests, delivering both rhythmic action and a sense of daring adventure. Sony was not alone. Sega strove to keep pace with the Saturn, which, despite its programming complexity, brought genuine arcade ports and slick FMV sequences. Nintendo, ever loyal to children and families, launched the Nintendo 64 in 1996 with its analog stick and softened triangle-shaped polygons. Mario suddenly leapt off the 2D plane into full 3D space, rotating and twisting as he explored a meticulously designed cubic castle. Pokémon Stadium, or GoldenEye 07, turned the living room into the first LAN arenas, where friends gathered to duel with polygonal weapons. On the PC side, 3D worlds also exploded with titles like Quake, Tomb Raider, and Half-Life, elevating first-person shooters from crude viewpoints to tense experiences with narratives hidden behind every wall. Stereo sound enveloped the environment, dynamic lighting cast shadows with each footstep, creating an unprecedented sense of immersion. The CD-ROM was more than storage. It was the key to a multimedia door. Trailers, rich soundtracks, even level-building tools. Kits that let communities modify and expand games. Titles became a fusion of cinematic effects, music, voice acting, and engaging gameplay. When the console powered down and the disc was ejected, the memory of that 3D journey still resonated. Polygon counts, FMV segments, emotionally laden lines of dialogue. We knew that video games had truly stepped beyond flat planes, rising into a new art form, where technology, narrative, and creativity converge. Chapter 3. When games travelled everywhere in pockets and on internet waves. As dusk falls over bustling streets, for gaming enthusiasts, the day truly begins when they pull the Game Boy from their jacket pocket. Launched in 1989, Nintendo's Game Boy was the first handheld console to feel genuinely mobile. A monochrome screen, a size that fit in the palm, and AA batteries that ran for hours on end. The bundled game, Tetris, was not only entertaining but proof of how well one could exploit idle moments. On a bus ride, during a break between classes, or even under a dim hospital lamp, those geometric blocks fell steadily, keeping players glued to each row and column. No one imagined that this tiny plastic box would spark a revolution. Yet on its debut in Japan, it sold over 118,000 units in just the first 4 days. When Pokémon Red and Green appeared in Japan in 1996, the Game Boy truly captured the hearts of millions of children. Ash Ketchum's first steps into the Pokémon world, with Pikachu sounding from the built-in speaker, had students lining up early in the morning to buy a console. The Game Boy Color inherited that success in 1998, donning a translucent shell in 3 bright hues and supporting 32,768 colours. From the original's faint black and white screen, the Game Boy Color opened a vibrant world. Pokémon species rendered in varied shades, the landscapes of Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening brought to life, and protagonists in Pokémon Gold and Silver, inspiring millions of boys and girls to battle anytime, anywhere. Nintendo was not alone. Sony and Sega also joined the fray. The Atari Lynx debuted in 1989 with a colour screen and networking capability, but its limited battery life and bulky power requirements quickly sidelined it. The Sega Game Gear featured a TFT color display, stereo sound, and a diverse game library, but its high energy consumption forced players to carry a large pack of AA batteries for extended sessions. Still, the Game Gear had loyal fans who held it aloft on buses, eyes fixed on Sonic the Hedgehog, savouring speed even with only 6 hours of battery life. A few years later, Japan saw the Neo Geo Pocket and Bandai's WonderSwan, lighter and more power efficient. But the biggest impact remained the Game Boy, which became an icon for a generation. Alongside handheld consoles, mobile phones gradually became platforms for simple yet addictive games. In the mid-1990s, as Nokia 6110 and 3210 phones proliferated, Snake became a phenomenon. With just a numeric keypad and a black and white screen, people were enthralled guiding a serpent to eat dots, growing ever longer until it wrapped around itself. Preloaded in ROM and requiring no installation, Snake became a modern killer app. A phone was not only for calls and messages, but also for entertainment, anytime, anywhere. The next turning point came when WAP, Wireless Application Protocol, paved the way for over-the-air games. Java, code on J2ME enabled simple, colourful minigames, block stacking, shooting balls, or 2D racing. Each day, players could download a few kilobytes of new games over creaky GPRS. Though speeds were slow and data costly, the thrill of waiting for installation to finish and then launching a game on a tiny screen excited many. In that era, PDAs like Palm Pilot and Pocket PC emerged, allowing games to be installed from memory cards. Simple ports of Minesweeper, Solitaire, or even rudimentary Doom running slowly demonstrated that any device with a screen and processor could be a playground. Amateur hackers shared installation files, speed-up tweaks, and lag fixes on online forums, fueling a vibrant community late into the night. As the new millennium dawned, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi ushered in local connectivity for handhelds. DS players pressed wireless to race Mario Kart, Double Dash, or enter tag mode in Animal Crossing Wild World. The PSP joined in, allowing free demo downloads via Wi-Fi, filling internet cafes with espionage agents in Metal Gear Acid and thrilling racing sequences. But connectivity was not only mobile. On desktops, faster internet became common. Dial-up 56K gradually gave way to ADSL and fibre. People accessed forums and chat rooms and entered virtual worlds like World of Warcraft, an MMORPG dominating from 2004 onward. Millions across South Korea, Europe, and North America sat at their PCs, assuming roles, conquering dungeons, forming guilds. The feeling of playing alongside friends in a shared kingdom erased geographic barriers. Browser-based gaming also exploded thanks to Flash. Newgrounds, Miniclip, Congregate became playgrounds for thousands of indie developers. With only a browser and an internet connection, one could solve puzzles, shoot down the first Angry Birds-style targets, or test reflexes in Crush the Castle. Short, simple games with high viral potential. Anyone could share a link via blogs or email, laid the foundation for today's casual gaming world. Meanwhile, thanks to YouTube and streaming platforms, gaming communities shared victory moments, walkthroughs, and created Let's Play culture. From early screen recordings with gasps at boss defeats to live streams watched by hundreds of thousands, games became global entertainment content. Another milestone was the arrival of the iPhone in 2007 and the App Store in 2008. Early titles like Doodle Jump, Fruit Ninja, and Cut the Rope demonstrated that with just touch controls and a tap of the finger, one could embark on an adventure. The App Store quickly hosted tens of thousands of games, free and paid, ushering in the true era of mobile gaming. During that period, social networks like Facebook integrated games, Farmville, Candy Crush Saga, so that people connected through invites. Gaming was no longer solitary. Players competed with friends, sent help requests, and showcased achievements. Games became communication bridges, a space for praise, banter, and even quarrels. Looking back, we see a continuous thread, from Tetris's black and white blocks in a pocket to the vivid virtual worlds on touchscreens, from clicking to join a private server to facing a boss across entire universes. Games have truly transcended boundaries. They accompany us to classrooms, workplaces, cafes, even our beds, where pixelated dreams still drift within real dreams. On a quiet evening in the early 2010s, in a small room bathed by the cool glow of a computer screen, a young man strapped on a cumbersome device, a plastic box over his eyes with two straps hugging his head. He tapped a controller lightly, and within seconds the world around him disappeared. He was no longer in the cramped room, but standing in a virtual universe. Distant, snow-capped mountains, wind rustling through tree canopies, and ahead of him an ancient gate inviting him to step through. This was not a dream, but virtual reality. Virtual reality, VR, once belonged only to science fiction. People linking their minds to computer systems and living in spaces generated by code. Yet thanks to breakthroughs in graphics processing, motion tracking, and network speeds, VR gradually entered everyday life, carrying a grand promise. You don't just play a game, you live inside it. The pioneering headset in the wave of consumer VR was the Oculus Rift, launched via a 2012 Kickstarter campaign. The initial goal was straightforward: build a device light and smooth enough to avoid motion sickness, capable of real-time head tracking. But its effect exceeded expectations. Indie developers eagerly crafted the first VR experiences: first-person shooters, garden simulation apps, forest walks, or sitting inside a spaceship gazing at star systems. When Facebook acquired Oculus in 2000, VRC ceased to be a niche trend. It became mainstream. Major players like Sony with PlayStation VR, HTC with Vive, and Valve with Index all joined in. Within a few years, players could genuinely rise from their chairs, take a few steps around the room, swing their arms, lean, crouch, and interact with a virtual environment as if it truly existed. Video games entered three-dimensional space, not only in visual terms, but as a physical, embodied experience. Instead of using a controller to rotate the camera, one actually turns their head. Instead of pressing a button to throw a ball, one makes a real swinging motion. Titles like Beat Saber, where you slash coloured blocks to rhythmic music with two glowing sabers, leave players sweating after just a few songs. Or Super Hot VR, where time moves only when you move, making each dodge or punch tense like a scene from an action film. VR's reach extends beyond entertainment. Educational applications, therapy, and even military training began integrating virtual reality. A medical student can practice surgery on a 3D model. Someone with a fear of heights can undergo exposure therapy by climbing an imaginary 2,000-metre peak without leaving their room. Even social spaces like VR Chat or Rec Room let players worldwide assume cartoon avatars, chat, laugh, host events, or watch movies together, all from home. Alongside VR as its cousin, augmented reality, AR. If VR immerses you in a wholly virtual world, AR brings virtual elements into the real world. You still see your own room or walk familiar streets, but now, a virtual cat might appear on your table wagging its tail, or a dragon might circle a monument in the park. The most explosive success of AR was Pokemon Go, released by Niantic in 2000. Within the first week, millions took to the streets hunting Pokemon, following footprints on maps from one park to an ancient temple, all to catch a virtual Pikachu perched on a bench. People braved sun and rain, even organising offline events just to raid bosses together. Never before had a game become a community outdoor activity. No one stayed cooped up indoors anymore. The game stepped into the real world. VR and AR go beyond mere amusement. Microsoft HoloLens, Magic Leap, and enterprise AR products let architects build building models in meeting rooms. Doctors view 3D organ imagery floating in space. Or technicians repair machines with overlaid instructions on the real hardware. With ever faster computing and lighter headsets, the future, where we wear ordinary-looking glasses and see extra layers of information over the world, is not far off. A parallel trend transforming how we play is cloud gaming. Previously, to run a heavy title like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Cyberpunk 2077, you needed a powerful PC or the latest console. Now, with a sufficiently fast internet connection, you can play those games on a phone or smart TV. Services like Nvidia GeForce Now, Xbox Cloud Gaming, xCloud, and PlayStation Now stream gameplay from cloud servers. Your device only sends input signals, while powerful machines in data centers handle the rendering. In other words, you need no specialized hardware, just a good connection. This isn't only convenient, it democratizes gaming. Anyone, anywhere, can access a vast library of games without huge investment. The combination of VR, AR, and cloud turns gaming from a solitary activity into a communal phenomenon. No longer confined to living rooms or screens, players can immerse, move, interact, and connect, all in real time, on their chosen platform. A child in a rural area can adventure alongside an adult in the city. Someone with physical disabilities can still run in virtual worlds like anyone else. Games become a form of digital presence, almost an extension of consciousness, a space to try on different selves, make alternative choices, and experience emotions unavailable in real life. From the most primitive roots, stones engraved in Senate, or pieces in the royal game of Ur, we've arrived at a strange point. Games are no longer outside real life, they are part of real life. Morning light seeps through the window of a small room, illuminating the glowing screen of a space, not merely for playing, but for living. The era when games were confined to guiding a character past obstacles is gone. Now games no longer stand apart from daily life, but become an extension of the world we inhabit. The story begins with a project called Minecraft, released in 2009 by independent developer Marcus Notch Persson. No one could have guessed that with its blocky graphics, simple sounds, and seemingly boring gameplay, Minecraft would tap into a primal human desire: the freedom to create. Its world has no limits. You chop trees for wood, dig earth to form caves, then piece together blocks into houses, castles, even entire miniature cities. That simple voxel structure serves as a blank canvas for imagination, where millions, from children to architects, from gamers to digital artists, collaborate to build massive structures and share them over the internet. Minecraft is not just a game, it's a platform. There are community-made maps tailored to every genre, from classic survival mode, where you battle monsters at night, to creative mode with infinite resources, letting you focus purely on building. Then there are servers hosting thousands of players, where you join a virtual life resembling a miniature society, marketplaces for trading items, economic systems, rules set in place, even simulated police to maintain order. In that blocky world, people still reveal deep social instincts: cooperation, competition, forming guilds, then conflicts and resolutions, just like in the real world. Around the same time, another platform took shape: Roblox, which began in 2006 but truly exploded after 2013. Unlike Minecraft's rigid voxels, Roblox is a creative marketplace where anyone can use Lua, a simple scripting language, to design their own mini-games. Players don't just enter worlds built by others, they can become developers themselves, creating fighting games, first-person shooters, simulators, even virtual dating experiences. Quickly, Roblox evolved into a parallel universe, where millions of worlds connect through a single interface, allowing players to jump from one game to another with one click. From a simple game, Roblox has grown into a cross-border creative community, offering real income opportunities even for young people not yet of legal age. From Minecraft to Roblox, the gamers' platform wave has spread, reaching both established names and newcomers. Epic Games, maker of Fortnite, has elevated this concept further. When Fortnite launched in 2017, it was known as a battle royale. 100 players parachute onto an island, collect weapons, build fortifications from wood and metal, and fight until only one remains. But that was only the beginning. With Fortnite Creative, Epic gave players freedom to build maps and game modes, even integrating live music events featuring virtual IRL scene, concerts by Marshmello or Travis Scott, drawing tens of millions of viewers worldwide. Thus, Fortnite became not just a game, but a multimedia entertainment platform, where music, cinema, and gaming converge. Players attend concerts, interact with live event content, then seamlessly switch to competitive matches with friends, all within the same application. As games become platforms, the boundary between game and social network grows ever more blurred. Discord, Slack, TeamSpeak, originally created for voice chats among gamers, gradually became popular communication tools for many purposes. Players create private channels, share resources, stalk rivals, or simply hang out after grinding. Such servers can host a few dozen people or expand to tens of thousands, with well-structured channels like mini forums, organising events, tournaments, and even live streaming directly within the chat. Meanwhile, the notion of the metaverse, a linked virtual universe, has begun to infiltrate the dreams of tech firms. Facebook rebranded as Meta in October 2021, betting on a future where people will communicate, work, and entertain themselves in a continuous virtual space. Imagine you wear AR/VR glasses, assume an avatar to meet partners in a virtual meeting room, then together go to a digital cafe to chat and relax. You buy an avatar suit, decorate the meeting room in a cyberpunk style, and sign contracts, all within the metaverse. Although technological and experiential challenges remain, the metaverse dream has spurred millions of developers, startups, and even traditional industries to rethink the concept of work and leisure spaces. Blockchain and NFTs, non-fungible tokens, have also enveloped gaming, opening a new direction. Unique digital assets that can be traded, bought, and sold, carrying real-world value. In games like Axie Infinity, players raise Axies, virtual creatures, and battle to earn tokens convertible to real money. Virtual land in the Sandbox or Decentraland trades for hundreds of thousands of dollars, even though it's only pixel or polygon territory. This raises questions. Are digital assets real assets? And when games tie closely to virtual economies, how do we view value, ownership, and the distribution of benefits between developers and the community? Beyond entertainment, game platform concepts have seeped into education, healthcare, and business. Classcraft transforms the classroom into a role-playing game where students earn experience points by completing assignments, participating in discussions, and even organising school events. Doctors use Rescape innovation to simulate surgeries, letting medical students practice before entering an actual operating room. Businesses hold team-building workshops in 3D virtual environments, where employees move avatars between booths, receive virtual gifts, and participate in workshops. Game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine have long been used. Beyond game development, they power virtual reality experiences, architectural visualizations, animated film production, advertising, and industrial simulations. From hand-marked stones in ancient Egypt to virtual avatars gathering in the metaverse, games have risen into a platform for an entire culture and digital economy. Each technological advance, from voxels to polygons, from CDs to streaming, from touchscreens to AR/VR glasses, marks a turning point that enriches human experience and expands the concept of gaming. Yet the true magic lies not only in technology. The root of gaming remains the desire to connect, to create, and to escape physical boundaries. When we build virtual cities together, host live-streamed concerts, share open-source code, or trade digital assets, we are creating a community, a new society both different from and similar to the real world. In that society, the line between player and developer gradually fades. We do not merely consume content, but co-create it. Chapter 4: When Artificial Intelligence and Virtual Ecosystems Walk Together. A Dawn of 2030 reveals a gaming world where the boundary between virtual and real grows ever thinner. From the outside, one sees a person wearing AR glasses, gripping a sleek controller, their eyes dreamy before shimmering, volumetric images overlaying reality. Within, countless complex computations run continuously, from generating terrain and creatures to modelling behaviour and psychology of virtual characters. All of it runs on artificial intelligence, AI, which began as simple algorithms and has now become the heartbeat of these virtual realms. The experience begins when a player logs into a virtual ecosystem world, a procedurally generated environment freshly created by AI for each individual. Instead of opening a fixed map, the player glances at the HUD map, and hills, groves of trees, fluffy clouds in the virtual sky appear instantly, crafted according to their habits, preferences, play history, and even their heart rate. The AI does more than render scenery. It understands mood, choosing colour palettes and lighting rhythms based on emotion. A sunset here is not only beautiful, it soothes the soul, making the player feel as though they have stepped into a dream. Within this space, virtual characters are no longer fixed polygons following brief scripts. Thanks to advanced machine learning models, each NPC, non-player character, possesses its own intelligence, capable of flexible conversation, decision-making, and even remembering the player's face. When you exchange a few greetings, the NPC analyzes linguistic nuances and tone, then responds with fitting words and gestures. They can praise, criticize, offer guidance, or complain if you neglect them too long. One player recounted, after 2 hours of wandering, she realized the elderly NPC in a village had grown worried about her, invited her home to shelter from the rain, and shared stories of its youth. It felt like stepping into a cinematic drama where the lead actor is an algorithm. Not only NPCs but wildlife also become behaviourally diverse. Wild creatures no longer simply flee or attack. They hunt in packs, seek sleeping dens at night, and communicate emotionally through calls. Each species in this world has its own ecosystem. Food sources, predators, breeding seasons, even migration patterns. Players can experience being a virtual biologist, setting traps, tracking footprints, collecting specimens, then uploading that data to servers, contributing to a shared global digital museum. Alongside AI-generated content, multi-sensory feedback technology is deeply integrated. When you hold a virtual apple, haptic gloves simulate its weight and softness. When you touch a decayed wooden door, your hand immediately feels the rough texture. When you step into a dense forest area, you smell faint damp leaves, feel a cool breeze through the AR headset's vents, and even hear insects buzzing near your ear. Experimental setups may use vibrating chairs, active noise-cancelling headphones, and scent emitters to perfectly recreate each moment. So you don't just play but live across blended senses, making every second in the virtual world a fully immersive experience. As AI technology grows more powerful, game creation tools are no longer reserved for professional developers. Anyone can now harness AI to paint a game with words alone. Instead of writing hundreds of lines of code, you simply say, create a misty wet forest with dim light, a gently bubbling stream, and floating luminescent creatures. And the AI immediately sketches the map, fills in details, balances sounds, and stands ready for you to step in. The design process becomes conversational, light and natural. Communities share prompt snippets, iterating and combining them to craft ever more vivid worlds. Beyond purely virtual environments, the next step is multi-dimensional gaming. leveraging mixed reality technology to blend virtual worlds, real-world surroundings, and hidden layers of data. With just a smartphone and a specialized app, you can scan your real space, then pour virtual content onto it. Your living room becomes an archaeological expedition map. Walls turn into cavern crevices, ceilings become forest canopies, and the dining table transforms into a spaceship control console. Players move physically, but the experience feels as though they inhabit another world, with AI automatically mapping real objects, preserving scale and perspective, and projecting compatible virtual elements. Beneath the technological grandeur, creators, artists, writers, musicians, and data scientists collaborate more closely than ever. A decentralized project might emerge. AI generates images from an author's narrative. An engine processes context to produce fitting ambient audio. Haptic engineers tune feedback intensity, and biometric sensors analyze heart rate and breathing to adjust the virtual environment in real time, soothing or stimulating emotions per the scenario. Instead of a small game development team, there is now a global network where everyone contributes pieces, building an endlessly creative mosaic. This process inevitably faces challenges. As AI grows smarter, questions arise around creative copyright, ethical responsibility, and privacy. If you use AI to create a character based on someone's real face or voice, who ultimately owns it? When AI automatically adjusts a player's emotions via lighting and sound, do we lose control of our own mood? And in a virtual world where every action is recorded and analysed, is there room left for player privacy? Yet the whirlwind of innovation sweeps onward. Next-generation AI models, large language networks, AI music systems, real-time graphics engines promise even deeper, more complex interactive worlds, where every small decision by the player causes the virtual universe to respond dynamically, free from repeated scripts. Players may set grand objectives, building a civilization, establishing laws, then watching AI manage and evolve that virtual society. A form of gamer's simulation. Games not only to play but to simulate, study, and learn about human society itself. Thus, as dawn breaks in 2030, the realm of play entwines with AI and virtual ecosystems, forging experiences that blur lines between creation and consumption, reality and imagination, individual and community, continuing the age-old human impulse to explore, to connect, and to dream within worlds both real and virtual. In the quiet research room of a Swiss university, 3 scientists lean over the map of a strange city. This city does not exist in the real world. It has no name on Google Maps, no entry in national census data. Yet here more than 60,000 people live. They go to work, study, cook, fall in love, argue, organise protests, and occasionally commit crimes. None of them are real humans. All are computer-controlled entities, called agents, existing within a closed social simulation. In the hands of these scientists, the game has become a vast laboratory where human society is observed, experimented on, and better understood. The concept is not entirely new. Since the 1980s, models like SimCity have given players the chance to build and manage a city as they wished. Zoning neighbourhoods, placing factories, managing traffic and budgets, and suffering the consequences of mistakes. However, SimCity remains a limited simulation in which all citizens are mere statistical values. Now, thanks to AI and supercomputers, agent-based social simulations have become so sophisticated that each entity has its own characteristics: age, education level, personality, memories, habits, and even the capacity for independent decision-making. You do not merely build a city, you create an entire self-organizing society. In these simulations, designers do not impose a fixed script. They define only the basic social physics, for example, wages, taxes, healthcare costs, environmental quality, population density, and allow agents to adapt on their own. You can simulate the impact of a new policy, say increasing child allowances in the Western District or lowering housing prices in the suburbs. Within minutes, the system shows changes. A surge in young population, shifts in household spending, more complex urban traffic, and previously calm neighbourhoods becoming chaotic due to a baby boom. Governments in many countries have begun using such game-like tools to simulate urban planning policies, turning games into strategic planning instruments rather than mere entertainment. In environmental research, simulation games open bold new directions. Imagine a virtual world with a closed ecosystem where every river, forest, and fish school has interaction indices with the environment. The player's task is to build a sustainable economy, but every action leaves a trace. Water pollution from factories, deforestation from logging, rising temperatures due to heavy traffic. Consequences do not appear immediately, but accumulate over years in the game, mirroring real-world dynamics. A decision that seems harmless at first can lead to a global ecological disaster after 100 years in the simulation. Thanks to AI and accurate physical models, these simulations help people intuitively perceive delayed consequences, something raw reports or statistics cannot convey directly to the senses. In economics, multi-agent virtual worlds are likewise becoming arenas for studying market models, consumer behaviour, and financial contagion. A notable example is EVE Online, where over 2 decades players have built a complex financial system with banks, contracts, supply chains, exchange rates, and even inflation. Real economists have begun analysing behaviours in EVE as they would a real market. From how virtual citizens hoard assets during crises to how player groups manipulate markets via in-game media campaigns, everything provides valuable data, illustrating behavioural economics theories far more vividly than any traditional laboratory. Even in education, game-based simulations are replacing dry lectures. A history class is no longer just reading and answering questions, but actively participating in history itself. In a medieval simulation, each student takes on a role: blacksmith, lord, merchant, monk, peasant. The entire class interacts within a closed world run by AI. Failed harvests lead to famine, rising taxes spark peasant revolts, wars disrupt trade. Students learn not only the events but also the dynamic motivations behind historical decisions. When you are a participant, you understand why one faction chooses peace and another war. You see history not as a static sequence of dates, but as the sum of thousands of individual choices in a complex network. Similarly, in healthcare, game-based social simulations allow testing pandemic scenarios, how a virus spreads, at what speed, and how quarantine policies affect public psychology. Some agent-based models help governments assess how fake news circulates in communities, then design effective preventive communication strategies. Games are no longer only war simulators. They become tools for societal defence, letting us practice coping with unseen risks, so that when they arrive we are prepared. Of course, with such powerful simulations come major ethical and governance questions. When a game becomes complex enough to simulate real society, can it be misused for manipulation, persuasion, or experimentation on behaviours real people would never consent to? If a government builds a game model to predict public reactions to a new law, is that wise policy making or an overreach? And if simulations can forecast behaviours of specific groups or regions, how far does the line blur between scientific research and surveillance? Nevertheless, one cannot deny that game as simulation science has pushed the history of games far beyond its original bounds. From dice rolled for amusement, games have become platforms modelling humanity's most complex systems: society, environment, economy, education, and more. Closing part 2 of Chapter 4, we recognise that games have gone beyond their initial expectations. They do not only tell stories, evoke feelings, or connect us, they also help us understand. Understand the world, understand ourselves, understand the future, and how we might influence it. a quiet spring evening, in a room with nothing but a compact headset, a pair of haptic gloves, and a lone player sitting silently. He hasn't chosen a game, hasn't opened any interface, hasn't pressed start. Yet in the system, AI has already begun working. It has analysed his heart rate, blink rate, breathing, and accumulated data from months of gameplay. He enjoys suspense that isn't overly intense, often abandons lengthy matches, favours wild landscapes, subdued soundtracks, and especially characters with deep personalities. Within seconds, the system generates an entirely new world, exclusively for him. No more one-size-fits-all games. No predetermined levels that every player must experience in the same sequence. Now the game world is crafted specifically according to each individual's psychology, habits, life rhythm, and emotions, powered by AI's super personalization. This idea starts with a small shift, from one game for everyone to one game for each person. Just as Netflix suggests films and Spotify curates music, games now recommend. But rather than merely listing options, they build a distinct world for each individual. Imagine you open the game and there is no title screen. Instead, you find yourself standing in a misty meadow where every detail, every light tone, every piece of music, even the sound of the wind, is arranged to help you feel at ease, focused, and immersed. A character approaches, perhaps a boy if you seek innocence, or an elder if you seek guidance, and they don't recite pre-scripted lines but converse with you like an old friend, recalling decisions you made in other games, referring to your recent mood as inferred from your in-game behaviour. Here, AI is no longer a dialogue system. It is an empathy system. It learns you, understands you, reflects you, and from that, tailors your experience. Every character, every situation, every challenge is generated dynamically in response to the player's behaviour. If you tend to avoid conflict, the game gently but firmly guides you towards scenarios requiring confrontation. If you often feel discouraged, the game might insert gentle, optimistic conversations, not as moralising lectures, but as a natural part of the world you're interacting with. You might not notice, but details like denser foliage, softer lighting, gentler paths, or extended musical passages are all the game's responses to your emotional state. Some systems even connect to biometric sensors, measuring brainwaves, skin conductance, hormone levels via a wearable, to adjust the game atmosphere in real time. When you're stressed, the game soothes you. When you're lethargic, it lightly stimulates you. When you're focused, it raises intensity. And if you become distracted, the game can pause, guiding you back to equilibrium before continuing. Not everyone wants such deep intervention. But for those who need games as a place of mental renewal, this capability opens a completely new frontier. Games are no longer mere entertainment tools, but personalised therapy, a mirror, a companion, a journey of self-discovery. In some cases, AI systems can even evoke memories. For example, if you once had a favourite NPC in an old game, a new game might remind you of that emotion by recreating a similar face, voice, or conversational style. Not copying directly, but offering a gentle homage that makes you feel understood without being overt. Like a friend recalling past stories, AI forges connections between old and new experiences, between fragmented and continuous emotions. Deep personalization also yields endings no two players share. Where in the past you might find 5 or 10 different endings, now you may have thousands of distinct conclusions shaped by your own mindset, actions, emotions, and even weaknesses. Some games never conclude by a fixed script. They only end when the player realizes they have changed, enough to step out of that journey, carrying something healed within. Many developers now call this genre empathic games. Their aim is not conquest, achievements, or scores, but experience and self-understanding. There are games simulating a day in another person's life. You take on the role of someone living with dementia, or a young person with anxiety disorder. The game guides you through everyday scenes, grocery shopping, conversations, going to work, but with subtle shifts in sensations, visuals, and music so you directly feel that psychological state. This is how personalized games teach empathy, not just adapt to you. As content-generating AI and next-generation conversational AI, such as large language models, continue to advance, these possibilities will expand further. Soon you might say, I want a gentle adventure set in autumnal Paris, with a soundtrack reminiscent of Miyazaki's films, no combat, just exploration. And within minutes, the system creates a unique game that no one else has ever played. Each player becomes a map, a poem, a story, and each game is the world's response to that individual. At the end of this journey, you're no longer outside choosing content, you are the content. And the game is no longer something you play, but something you become. Chapter 5. The Primal Blueprint. When traditional games laid the foundation for virtual universes, let us return to the very beginning. Not the dawn of the digital era, not the sunrise of video games, but the very moment when humans placed a stone on the ground and imagined it to be a horse, a warrior, or a deity. Before writing existed, before history was carved into solid inscriptions, games already appeared as a natural reflex of imagination and the need to connect. And it is those traditional games, seemingly simple and rustic, that serve as the seeds for every shimmering virtual universe we know today. When you look at a board, whether chess, Go, or an old grid for simple paper and pencil play, you see an abstract model of the world, a geometric space governed by rules and order. The pieces represent forces, actions, power relations. Each move is a strategic decision, and over centuries, humans honed analytical thinking, logical reasoning, patience, even the capacity to guess others' intentions, all from small objects without electricity, without screens, without special effects. Traditional games like Senet in Egypt, the royal game of Ur in Mesopotamia, Go in ancient China, or Mancala in Africa share a common trait. They simulate real-life processes. Senet symbolizes the journey to the afterlife. Go depicts strategies of territory control and expansion. Mancala reflects sowing, harvesting, and food storage. In other words, these games were not only for entertainment, but served as means to understand, practice, and exert some measure of control over the world within the confines of play. Unlike modern video games, which may contain thousands of lines of code and millions of variables, traditional games are encapsulated in simple rules and minimal tools. A table, a few pieces, a handful of stones, sometimes just scratched lines on the earth. Their appeal and depth lie not in form, but in structure and expressiveness. From here emerges the core concept of game design. Rules, systems, goals, player states, elements that remain the foundation of every digital game today. Even the notion of a world in a game, where the player has a role, choices, rewards, and consequences, originates in traditional games. In a multi-hour Go match, the player is not merely moving stones, they become part of a world created by the game's rules. This is the earliest prototype of the immersive world concept that modern titles like Skyrim, The Witcher, or Elden Ring continue to explore and expand. Traditional games also first embodied the balance between luck and skill. In dice games, rock, paper, scissors, or ancient discus throwing contests, players learn to accept randomness, but also to calculate risk, predict reactions, and choose optimal timing. This lays the groundwork for the risk-reward mechanics in modern games, where each action has strategic value and chance plays its part in a complex symphony. Another important aspect is community. Traditional games are never solitary acts. They are always played with others, opponents, allies, or spectators. Play is a social event. In rural Vietnam, elders gather under banyan trees to play Tam Cook. In parts of Africa, children hopscotch through the village. In Japan, generations sit around a table playing Hanafuda during New Year. Games connect people through unspoken joy, through laughter, through subtle responses no dialogue could fully capture. That communal nature laid the foundation for online gaming later. Whether you control a gleaming 3D armoured character in an MMORPG, the essence of connection remains what our ancestors did when they played stone games under moonlight. The joy is not only in winning, but in seeing others' reactions, feeling collective suspense, and sharing stories after the match. That does not change, no matter how tools evolve. We cannot overlook the role of ritual and symbolism in traditional games. In many cultures, games are part of religious rites or community traditions. Some games serve not only for pleasure, but to remind people of cycles, of balance between win and loss, life and death, light and dark. Thus, games become cultural mirrors. Every piece or element in a traditional game carries layered meanings, from mythological to moral. Experienced modern game designers still learn from this. Creating depth in a game is not only about beautiful graphics or complex systems, but about embedding cultural symbols so the game reflects something about humanity and society. For example, Journey, with a pilgrim crossing a desert and almost no dialogue, ooze millions to tears. It touches something fundamental, elemental, much like an ancient game can evoke sorrow by a single misplaced move. From that viewpoint, traditional games are the prototypes of all modern virtual structures. From rules, behavioural logic, cultural symbolism, reactive mechanics to the yearning for connection. Everything we see in video games, virtual reality, and the metaverse originates from a stone rolled again and again on ancient ground. In the central highlands of Vietnam, as dusk falls and the sound of gongs echoes through the valley, children gather hand in hand to play tug of war, while elders watch with soft smiles, eyes full of nostalgia. A long rope, with two sides pulling not only by strength, but as a symbol of balance and counterforce. An unspoken ritual depicting the struggle between good and evil, humans and spirits, or even heaven and earth. Here, play is not simply joy, it is a cultural memory passed down. A way for the community to retell an old story through action. And it's not only the Central Highlands, not only Vietnam. Across all continents, every civilization, regardless of language, belief, or geography, shares the impulse to create games. They not only make children laugh, but help adults preserve what cannot be written in books. Values, customs, social structures, and sometimes the hidden sorrows of history beneath playful laughter. Let us journey across some lands to see how games, which may seem simple, serve as living libraries of humanity. Games of memory, Africa, and preservation through oral tradition. In many African societies, where oral culture plays the primary role, games become tools for preserving collective memory. Take Mancala, for example, a game with small pits on a wooden board and seeds or stones, not only a contest of skill. It reflects the rhythm of agricultural life, sowing, harvesting, and resource circulation. Each move is a metaphor. The player moves seeds from one pit to another, as if turning the cycle of seasons, as if saying, sow, and in time you shall reap. Meanwhile, rhythmic clapping games help children learn language, the names of ancestors, and ceremonial songs by playing and singing together. A 6-year-old girl might not yet read, but through the game she learns her clan's names, codes of conduct, and ways to connect with peers by playing the same games her ancestors played in centuries past. Games as ritual, Asia, and harmony between the individual and community. In Japan, Hanetsuki, a badminton-like game without a net, is often played at New Year's and regarded as a ritual to ward off evil spirits. Players use lightweight wooden paddles to strike a shuttlecock, trying to keep it aloft as long as possible. Each hit is not just technique, but a blessing for a year of lightness, resilience, and unbroken continuity. In ancient China, kite flying was not only for children. Flying kites in spring, when warm winds begin, symbolised releasing misfortune, the kite carrying away illness, sorrow, and worries into the sky. Meanwhile, children played hide and seek in the fields, and their laughter was believed to have a cleansing power, dispelling troubled spirits. In Vietnam, games like O An Quan, blindfold catching the goat, or tossing the ball in festivals reflect deep community values. O An Quan teaches children counting, sharing, patience and counterplay through small pebbles during festivals. Tossing the ball into a high-hung bamboo hoop, Nem Con, connects heaven, earth and people, throwing the ball skyward as if sending wishes up to the heavens. Games as lessons in power, Europe and social structure. In medieval European castles, nobles played chess, a game that clearly represented status and power strategy. Pawns stand for commoners, numerous yet weak. Rooks are fortresses, knights are cavalry, and the queen is the most powerful piece, graceful and flexible. The board is the battlefield, where the king, although central, is a piece that cannot protect himself. This game teaches not joy, but responsibility, alliances, and consequences. Players sharpen their minds, test their wits, and in a way learn governance from a wooden board. Meanwhile, in villages, common folk played boules, spun tops, or the game of the goose, jeu de loi, both pastime and allegory for life. Each space on the board is a turn, a trap, or an opportunity, just like life's unpredictable twists and turns. Games as resistance, the Americas, and identity and confrontation. In Latin America during colonial times, games were sometimes the only domain where indigenous peoples could preserve cultural identity. The Maya, for example, had the ball game Poc Ta Poc, or pelota, using hips and shoulders to strike a ball through a stone hoop. Not merely a sport, but a religious ritual expressing a belief in the continual motion of the cosmos. Despite oppression, this game persisted in villages as an act of cultural preservation against assimilation. Among North American indigenous communities, games like lacrosse, originally a ritual among tribes, became a means to resolve conflicts without warfare. Hundreds of participants might play over several days, with the whole community as spectators. Winning or losing was not just about sport, but a statement of strength and legitimacy. When violent conflict was forbidden, the game became a symbolic battleground where cheers replaced weapons. Games and the memory of things lost. There are games that once thrived, played exuberantly by many, but now survive only in texts or in the recollection of an elder. Like the original wooden mahjong sets, no longer hand-carved by artisans, or the village bamboo swing, now gone because no one builds its support poles, or finger marble games on earthen grounds, now living only as digital recreations. Yet the wonder is, games do not die. They transform, take new forms, and re-emerge in fresh guises. Today you can find digitized Mancala versions on your phone. You can play Go against an AI in a browser. You can watch others stream Nem, Con via VR controllers. Each time a traditional game returns in the modern world, it is not just nostalgia but a cultural heartbeat echoing within the digital age. In this way, we do not lose the game. We continue to retell our ancestors' stories with newer tools, brighter screens, and ever wider imagination. On the touchscreen of a modern tablet, a boy gently slides his finger across the squares of the O An Quan game. Each digital pebble moves with a soft sound effect, accompanied by a faint folk melody. There is no brick courtyard, no opponent sitting across, no raucous laughter echoing like in the old village square. Yet the feeling remains familiar. This is the magic of the digital age. Traditional games do not disappear, but transform, living on in a new world. We are witnessing a special era, one in which cultural memory is being reprogrammed. Games once fading from the memories of earlier generations are now recreated through technology, images, sounds, touch, and sometimes virtual reality. From folk games to classic board games, all are being digitized, gamified, archived, and shared. Not merely as museum artifacts, but as new, vivid, and more connected forms of play than ever before. Digitization, the first step to preserve the old spirit. One of the earliest steps in reviving traditional games is digitising their rules. In libraries, museums, and educational projects, people collect materials, interview elders, record how games are played and their regulations. Seemingly minor details like, if a pebble touches the boundary you lose, or you can only hop if there's no one in the circle, are systematically documented and rewritten into programming logic. Soon thereafter, a host of traditional game apps emerge. In Vietnam, there are digital versions of Ludo variants like Ko Ka Ngua, Ko Gang, O An Quan, Tam Kuk. In Japan, apps for playing Hanafuda cards are revamped with modern interfaces. In Africa, Mancala is ported to iOS and Android, offering backgrounds of red earth, real hand graphics, or carved wood aesthetics, reminiscent of the original. Though the experience cannot fully replicate sitting in a courtyard, technology offers something valuable: accessibility and propagation. With any internet-connected device, a child in Canada can play O An Quan with a friend in the Philippines. They need not share a language, but can share the same game, and through it, a piece of culture. Integration into classrooms, when education and play join hands. Today, many schools reintroduce traditional games into curricula, not only for their cultural value but for diverse learning benefits. A game of Ko Gan helps students develop logical thinking. A folk game like Dragon and Rainbow Group trains physical skills and teamwork. With technology, traditional games are redesigned as interactive educational games. EdTech startups build platforms where students play in online groups, each on their own device, controlling avatars or virtual versions of folk games together. Teachers can monitor scores, reaction times, and even assess cooperation skills. Instead of written tests, students are evaluated through gameplay. In Japan, elementary students learn history via a digital Hanafuda game. In India, traditional Palanguli, a Mancala variant, is programmed as a math lesson on number distribution. In France, students study Napoleonic warfare through a tactical board game inspired by classical chess-like boards. Virtual reality and augmented reality, bringing play, spaces back into your home. A further step is integrating AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality, to immerse players in traditional game settings. You might wear a VR headset and step into an ancient village, where children are skipping rope, playing Nemcon, ball toss, inviting you to join. Motion-sensitive controllers let you feel tossing a pebble, pulling a tug-of-war rope, or touching friends in a blindfold catch game. Some projects even recreate the entire cultural environment around the game, not only the gameplay itself but the sounds of drums, wind and elders' laughter, like a frozen moment from the past, brought to life through technology. Augmented reality also turns parks into traditional playfields. With a smartphone you can see folktale characters playing O An Quan beneath a tree, or a Xiang Qi, Chinese chessboard, moving its pieces before your eyes. You no longer need to imagine. Imagination itself now takes visible form. Media and social networks, when folk games become trends. Today, many folk games spread again via TikTok and YouTube. Short videos capturing groups of young people playing shuttlecock kicking, group jump rope, or shuttlecock kicking on concrete courts garner millions of views. Games are no longer just old things to preserve, but nostalgia trends, a mode of self-expression and community bonding. Some creative content even mixes traditional games with modern music, digital graphics, or fashion, turning the game into artistic inspiration. Thus, the younger generation not only relearns these games but reinvents them, much as their ancestors did when they first placed stones on the ground. Reconnecting generations. When grandparents and grandchildren play together online, one of the most beautiful aspects of digitizing traditional games is that it bridges generational gaps. A grandmother who played O An Quan in 1965 can now sit beside her grandchild and teach the game, not needing a courtyard or pebbles, only a tablet. They play together, share stories of past summers, and write the story forward. In the digital space, memory and the present are no longer separated. Many families hold traditional game nights online. Grandparents in the countryside, parents in the city, children abroad, all come together via screens to play simple, beloved games again. In Laughter and Bright Eyes, we understand that a game is never just a game. It's an undercurrent of connection, a gentle heritage that technology does not erase but makes clearer. Chapter 6. When games become a personal statement. The rise of indie games. One autumn day in 2008, amid countless giant titles from major studios with elaborate graphics and massive marketing campaigns, a small game called Braid unexpectedly appeared on Xbox Live Arcade. There was no blazing combat, no muscular heroes or thunderous firearms. Braid told a gentle tale of a man searching for a woman, presented through oil painting-like scenes and subtly crafted time-based puzzles. Those who completed it came to realise this was more than a game. It was a personal manifesto, a coded journal expressed through gameplay, a work of art hidden beneath pixel layers. From that moment, a wave began to swell, the indie game wave. Games not produced by billion-dollar corporations, not created by hundreds of developers, yet carrying profound spirit, emotional depth, and intellectual freedom that far exceed any conventional boundary. Indie, a small word with a vast world. Indie is short for independent, originally used in music and film to denote works produced outside the mainstream system. In gaming, it refers to titles made by individuals or small teams, often without backing from large publishers. Where AAA games invest millions of dollars and must guarantee revenue. Indie games are like a bespoke cup of tea, a personal diary written, even if no one reads it, a poem without rhyme, yet still resonating in one's heart. They need not cater to mass market demands. They only need to remain honest to their creator's vision. Games as poetry. When imagery and sound become emotion, consider Journey 2012. A wordless game with no instructions, no health bars or scores. You are a robed figure crossing a desert, climbing mountains, occasionally encountering other players, but you cannot speak. Only gaze, gesture, and the sound of chimes. Despite its extreme simplicity, Journey moves millions. It doesn't teach you to fight, it teaches you to feel. Similarly, Limbo 2010 places the player in a monochrome world where a boy searches for his sister in a dark forest. No faces, no dialogue, no explicit context, but light, sound, and sudden death make each step weighty. The game says nothing directly, yet evokes countless interpretations. Games as autobiography, when memory becomes journey. Some indie games are not merely games, but fragments of real life. That Dragon Cancer 2000 exemplifies this poignantly. Developed by the parents of a young boy with cancer, you control the father, play with the child, take him to the hospital, hear his breaths, and eventually witness the pain of loss. Not everyone can finish playing, but those who do will never forget, or consider Papers. Please, a strange game where you assume the role of an immigration inspector at a border checkpoint in a fictional country. The game forces decisions in morally ambiguous scenarios. Admit refugees fleeing war, or deny them to keep your own job. It makes you understand repetition, stress, fatigue, and the cost of a wrong signature. Games as self-reflection. When players examine themselves, many indie games serve as mirrors, reflecting the player's inner self. In the Stanley Parable, you control an office worker and simply walk. But if you deviate from the narrator's instructions, the game reacts. Every time you veer off, the system reshapes its entire space, drawing you into a strange spiral. The game lacks a single clear ending, because the ending lies in whether you choose to heed or ignore the voice in your head. Undertale 2015 asks the player, if you can forgive instead of kill, will you choose mercy? And if you do not forgive, the game remembers. Even if you delete your saved data and start anew, it recalls the past you created. It was the first game that made players feel genuine guilt, not for losing, but for the way they chose to play. Community and open tools. When anyone can make a game, the indie surge owes much to accessible development tools. Unity, Game Maker, RPG Maker, Twine, and more. With a computer and weeks of learning, anyone can create their first game. The internet then delivers it to players worldwide via platforms like itch.io, Steam, or even forum posts. Many unique titles: A Short Hike, a relaxing mountain hike journey; Celeste, a story of overcoming depression through climbing; Return of the Obra Dinn, investigating time-frozen moments, began as small projects and went on to touch millions of hearts. No need to win, just understand each other. What makes indie games special is they don't require you to win. No scores, no achievements, no open-world checklist. They only ask you to stay, to wander, to listen, to feel, and sometimes to forgive yourself. The game does not tell you what to do. It asks, what would you do if this were your story? Indie games return play to its original essence, an interactive way of storytelling, a poem you live, a place where you can try and fail and gain deeper insight into something that once seemed simple. One autumn day in 2008, amid countless giant titles from major studios with elaborate graphics and booming marketing, a small game called Braid unexpectedly appeared on Xbox Live Arcade. There was no blazing combat, no muscular heroes or thunderous firearms. Braid told a gentle story of a man searching for a woman, presented through oil painting-like scenes and subtly crafted time puzzles. And those who finished it realised this was more than just a game. It was a personal statement, a coded journal expressed through gameplay, a piece of art hidden beneath pixel layers. From that moment, a wave began to rise, the indie game wave. Games not produced by billion-dollar corporations, not created by hundreds of developers, yet carrying spiritual weight, emotional depth, and intellectual freedom far beyond conventional limits. Indie, a small word with a vast world. Indie is short for independent, originally used in music and film to denote works made outside the mainstream system. In gaming, it refers to titles crafted by individuals or small teams, often without backing from large publishers. While AAA games invest millions of dollars and must ensure commercial return, indie games are like a personally brewed cup of tea, a diary written even if no one reads it, a poem without rhyme yet still resonating in the heart. They need not pander to market trends. They only need to be honest to their creator's vision. Games as poetry, when imagery and sound become emotion. Consider Journey 2012, a wordless game with no instructions, no health bars, no score. You play as a robed figure crossing a desert, climbing mountains, occasionally encountering other players, but you cannot speak. Only glances, gestures, and the sound of chimes. Despite its extreme simplicity, Journey moved millions. It doesn't teach you to fight, it teaches you to feel. Similarly, Limbo 2010 immerses the player in a monochrome world where a boy searches for his sister in a dark forest. No faces, no dialogue, no explicit context. But light, sound, and sudden death make each step weighty. The game says nothing directly, yet evokes countless interpretations. Games as autobiography, when memory becomes the journey. Some indie games are not merely games but fragments of real life. That Dragon Cancer 2015 exemplifies this poignantly. Developed by the parents of a young boy with cancer, you control the father, play with the child, take him to the hospital, hear his breaths, and eventually witness the pain of loss. Not everyone can finish playing, but those who do will never forget. Or consider Papers. Please, a strange game where you assume the role of an immigration inspector at a border checkpoint in a fictional country. The game forces decisions in morally ambiguous scenarios. Admit refugees fleeing war, or deny them to keep your job. It makes you understand repetition, stress, fatigue, and the cost of a wrong signature. Games as self-reflection. When magsites, players examine themselves. Many indie games serve as mirrors, reflecting the player's inner self. In the Stanley Parable, you control an office worker and simply walk. But if you deviate from the narrator's instructions, the game reacts. Every time you veer off, the system reshapes the environment, drawing you into a strange spiral. The game has no single clear ending, because the ending lies in whether you choose to heed or ignore the voice in your head. Undertale 2015 asks the player, if you can forgive instead of kill, will you choose mercy? And if you do not forgive, the game remembers. Even if you delete your save data and start anew, it recalls the past choices you made. It was the first game that made players feel genuine guilt, not for losing, but for the way they chose to play. Community and open tools. When anyone can make a game. The indie surge owes much to accessible development tools. Unity, Game Maker, RPG Maker, Twine, and more. With a computer and weeks of learning, anyone can create their first game. The internet then delivers it to players worldwide through platforms like itch.io, Steam, or even forum posts. Many unique titles: A Short Hike, A Relaxing Mountain Walk, Celeste, a story of overcoming depression through climbing, Return of the Obra Dinn, investigating frozen moments in time, began as small projects and went on to touch millions of hearts. No need to win, just understand each other. What makes indie games special is they don't require you to win. No high scores, no achievements, no open world checklists. They only ask you to stay, to wander, to listen, to feel, and sometimes to forgive yourself. The game does not tell you what to do. It asks, what would you do if this were your story? Indie games return play to its original essence, an interactive storytelling medium, a living poem, a place to try and fail, and gain deeper insight into something once thought simple. In a hazy virtual space with no scores and no victories, the player moves slowly through white rooms where each wall is a whisper and each door is a choice with an unclear destination. This game sets no objectives. It does not tell you who you are, and when it ends it offers no answers. Yet the lingering feeling, confusion, curiosity, and sometimes empathy shows that you have just experienced something deeper than a game. You have taken part in a statement. That is The Beginner's Guide, 2015. A game not meant to be played, but to be pondered. From here we step into a new realm of video games, where games are no longer mere entertainment tools, but become a form of expression, akin to painting, poetry, theatre, or cinema. Games as works of art, no explanation needed, only feeling. In the past, people argued, are games art? But today when you see someone standing silently before the screen of Grez, where a wordless girl traverses vibrant worlds to overcome sorrow, you no longer ask that question. You simply watch their quietness, their tears, and know that something has touched them. In Grizz, every movement is a dance, every scene an abstract painting, every interaction a metaphor for an emotional state. You don't need to understand everything, but you will feel it. That is when a game transcends its tools and controls to become a purely aesthetic experience. Similarly, Flower 2009 lets you control a single petal. You float across fields, stir breezes, transform landscapes. No characters, no dialogue. Yet it is a visual poem about nature, about tranquility, about the contrast between the natural world and the urban. Games as reflections of society. When politics enters digital space. Many indie or community-created games carry profound political content, not by wielding guns or staging protests, but through metaphor, structure, And silent choices. Papers, Please, as mentioned earlier, is a clear example. You play as an immigration officer, checking passports and deciding each person's fate. Not everyone is evil. Sometimes an undocumented immigrant carries medicine for a sick child. Other times a dissident hides weapons in their clothes. You must decide. And those choices reveal politics, without flags or slogans. This war of mine places you in the role of civilians surviving in a besieged city. You are not soldiers or heroes, only people struggling to live, sharing food, evading gunfire, and sometimes looting to survive. The game doesn't tell you who is right or wrong. It puts you in situations where all ideals become complicated. At another level, games like 1979, Revolution, Black Friday, Beholder or Orwell approach themes such as censorship, surveillance and resistance through interactive means. They do not force you into any ideology, but compel you to face the consequences of political choices, embodied in gameplay. Games as mirrors. When players look back at themselves, some games do, not try to tell a specific story, but simply create a space for self-reflection. The Stanley Parable, 2013, A Strange Mirror, asks the player, are you free or merely following a predetermined script? Whenever you attempt to go against the narrator's directions, the game reacts, shifts, mocks, or even breaks apart. Each choice, each click becomes a question about free will and self-awareness. Likewise, Everything 2017 lets you control everything. From an elephant, a rock, a speck of dust to an entire galaxy. Each time you embody something, you hear a snippet of philosophy about life, the cosmos, and the meaning of existence. No challenges, no destinations, just a digital meditation, and you are within it. Games as expressions of memory and trauma. Some indie games delve deeply into personal pain, telling private stories that some might have thought unsuitable for games. To the Moon is the story of two doctors who navigate the memories of a dying man to fulfill his final wish. The game resembles a graphic novel. No combat, just walking, listening, and understanding. Along this journey, the player gradually grasps the meaning of living with the past. Depression Quest, as its name suggests, puts you in the role of someone with depression. Whenever you attempt a positive choice, that option is greyed out. The game accurately simulates feelings of stagnation and hopelessness. So those who have never experienced it can empathise rather than judge. When games become artistic spaces, museums, exhibitions, and digital theatre. Today, many museums and art venues recognise games as a legitimate art form. Journey, Flower, Braid, Inside, Kentucky Route Zero, all have been exhibited in digital art exhibitions worldwide. Some interactive works are designed to be played only once. A digital piece may simulate a soldier's memories from combat. A game may have no save button. You play it once and then it deletes itself. Like a performance artwork, digital theatres host play sessions as performances. The audience not only watches, but participates. Some control characters, some write dialogue, some observe and take notes. At this point, games are no longer separate from art. They are part of art. And, after all, games as a way for humans to understand themselves. At the end of this chapter, we no longer ask, are games art? The question now is, what can't games be? Games can be memory, politics, poetry, pain, anger, prayer, recollection, an embrace, a sigh. Through interaction, games are not only for seeing, but for living. And through that we try on other lives, understand unfamiliar emotions, and sometimes, rediscover ourselves. Chapter 7. When players are no longer alone. The formation of the multiplayer world. One late evening in the 1990s, in a cramped boarding room, 4 friends sat huddled around a heavy CRT monitor. They connected their computers with long Ethernet cables, manually set IP addresses, and after a few minutes of fumbling, a voice rang out in the room. "We're in!" and they all shouted when a rocket from Quake hit the group. That shout wasn't just over an in-game kill. It was the moment when video games ceased being solo journeys and became a festival, a community, a world where more than one person could step in together. From the first local connections, the 1990s marked the early but vibrant era of multiplayer gaming. Initially, it meant LAN parties, friends gathering, linking up networks, playing together in the same physical space. Games like Doom, Quake, StarCraft and Warcraft 2 supported local network play. These were primitive yet exhilarating experiences. You could hear an opponent's keyboard clicks, shout when ambushed, or even sneak a peek at another's screen. Good-natured cheating. The game was no longer you versus AI, but real people with real reflexes, real tactics, and real emotions. From these connections, gaming began to evolve into a social activity, not just mere entertainment. When the internet changed the rules, then one day you no longer needed cables. Just a modem, a few minutes of dial-up connection, and you could play with someone hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Titles like Diablo, Ultima Online, EverQuest, and later World of Warcraft heralded the rise of online multiplayer gaming. Now, you weren't just playing with friends, but with strangers around the globe. You'd enter a town and see dozens or hundreds of people trading, leveling up, forming guilds and sharing stories. This was no longer a solo world. It was a living, changing realm shaped minute by the actions of thousands of players simultaneously. In World of Warcraft, you could be an unremarkable blacksmith, or a famed hero, depending on how you chose to live in that world. You might fight for glory, or simply sit fishing by a river, chatting with strangers. The game had become a micro-society, complete with its own culture, economy, and even politics. When guilds and communities form a core element of multiplayer gaming's power is the guild, or clan, where players connect not only because they play the same game, but because they build a shared collective identity. From boss hunting guilds in Lineage, PvP groups in Guild Wars, to FPS clans in Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, each community develops rules, traditions, roles, and most importantly, strong bonds. A player might remain loyal to their guild for years, celebrate festivals together in-game, hunt bosses at New Year's Eve, or even hold virtual weddings. The game is no longer just play, it becomes part of life, and players become genuine friends. Voice chat, forums, live streams. When gaming spawns an entire subculture, the development of voice chat, from TeamSpeak to Discord, and discussion forums for tactics turned gaming into a communication ecosystem. People not only played together but talked, shared, debated, and even fell in love through games. A League of Legends match isn't just 5v5, it spawns millions of forum posts, memes born from absurd plays, highlight clips spreading on YouTube, and streams lasting hours on Twitch. Gaming has transcended the screen. It becomes culture, content, conversation, and sport. The birth of esports. When playing becomes a profession. Once communities grow large enough, skill levels high enough, and audiences numerous enough, multiplayer games evolve into something no one had imagined. Electronic sports, esports. From StarCraft tournaments in South Korea in the 2000s to the international in Dota 2 with multi-million-dollar prize pools, games are not just pastimes but professional competitions. Players train like athletes with coaches, strategies, sponsorships and fans. Esports transforms multiplayer gaming into a global stage where individual skill and teamwork are showcased to the fullest. More players, more problems. However, the presence of millions in a shared space also brings conflicts, toxicity and challenges. From griefing and hateful speech to larger issues like sexism, racism or bullying. Multiplayer games don't just simulate society, they are a society, carrying both its bright and dark sides. Developers must build healthy communities, reporting systems, moderation tools, and even educate players. This shows that online gaming is no longer escaping reality. It's where we bring reality in, confront it, and learns social behaviour. The dawn of a borderless world. Despite these challenges, there is no denying that multiplayer gaming has opened a new horizon of human connection. Americans playing with Japanese, Brazilians interacting with Russians, children chatting with elders, all on the same virtual map. In times of social distancing, natural disasters, or conflict, multiplayer games remain a place where people can still meet, through voice, actions, and matches that may seem meaningless but forge profound bonds beyond any social network. One May morning in a remote village in Kenya, laughter rings out in a simple classroom. On the laptop screen, a group of students are playing Minecraft for the first time. They build their first house, plant trees, and learn how to survive in that strange, blocky world. But the magic is not in the virtual bricks. It lies in the fact that through this game, they begin to understand concepts of space, strategic thinking, and cooperation, things that had never appeared in the village's textbooks. Games in their original form may be a form of entertainment, but over time they prove to serve a much larger role. They become tools that change real life, not through digital power per se, but through their ability to connect, educate, heal, and spur action. From virtual networks to real communities, when players build worlds together. An interesting phenomenon occurs with multiplayer games. Even though they exist in a virtual space, humans still bring with them their instinct to connect and organise. They do not just play, they create forums, form groups, run charities, and even simulate governments. In EVE Online, alliances become so large that they require departments like communications, diplomacy, or customs, operating much like a small nation. In World of Warcraft, there are guilds that teach gaming to older adults, and guilds dedicated to players with autism. In Final Fantasy XIV, some guilds specialise in organising virtual weddings for real-life friends. Even when disasters or crises strike, gaming communities, often stereotyped as reclusive, can be among the fastest and most effective responders. After the 2011 earthquake in Japan, Final Fantasy XI guilds raised millions of yen within days. During the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, players gathered in Animal Crossing, Minecraft, or VR chat to hold weddings, birthdays, or even funerals for loved ones who had passed. The virtual world becomes a venue for community life. When the real world is too distant or too painful, games in education, when learning becomes play and play becomes learning. In the past, playing games in the classroom was taboo, but today, many educators recognise that games are not merely delivery tools, but powerful modes of thinking. Minecraft Education Edition is used to teach physics, geography, languages, and even history. Students no longer just read about the Palace of Versailles, they can walk through a block-by-block reconstruction, rebuilding details with their own hands. Kerbal Space Program helps students understand orbits, rockets, and space physics. Civilization 6 teaches world history, civilizations, and the consequences of war. Valiant Hearts guides players through World War I from civilians' perspectives, highlighting suffering more vividly than a textbook. For children with special needs, games are also excellent learning aids. Titles like Monument Valley or Journey help develop spatial intuition and emotional understanding. Children with autism can use games to practice communication skills, recognize emotions, and manage behavior. When learning becomes play, and play becomes understanding, knowledge ceases to be a burden and becomes a journey. Games as psychological therapy, a journey through pain. In many hospitals, clinics, and therapy centres, games are used as supportive therapy for psychological and cognitive recovery. Not every game fits, but some, with gentle interactivity, soothing visuals, and empathetic narratives, have proven their ability to help people move through crises. Celeste is a 2D platformer where you guide a young woman climbing a mountain. Yet that mountain symbolises the journey through anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Brief dialogue, challenges that seem impossible, and the sense of triumph after each failure all serve as metaphors for real psychological states. Tetris Effect, with its melodic music, mesmerizing visuals, and steady rhythm, has been shown to reduce anxiety and improve concentration. Journey, set in a vast desert, with wordless companionship of other players, creates a subtle, gentle feeling of connection, beneficial for those recovering from trauma. Even in PTSD therapy, some psychologists use interactive VR environments to help patients re-experience and regain control over painful memories, thereby promoting healing. When players take action, games as catalysts for social change. With their massive reach and capacity to form communities, games often become platforms for social activism. In Animal Crossing New Horizons in 2020, during a time when traditional political campaigning was stalled by the pandemic, many US candidates opened campaign islands where players could visit, pick up virtual flyers and talk with campaign representatives. A farming sim thus turned into a democratic outreach platform. Fortnite hosted conversations with social activists when racial injustice was at the forefront in the US. Roblox opened virtual museums on human rights history. Indie developers created numerous small games reflecting societal injustices, from migration, land loss and school violence to environmental pollution. Games in these contexts do not offer solutions directly, but pose questions. They do not conclude, but rather open paths for dialogue. From players to leaders, a generation shaped by games. Today, many people who grew up playing Age of Empires, SimCity, The Sims, Mass Effect or Skyrim have become engineers, urban planners, teachers, politicians, software developers, and even philosophers. They carry with them the trial and error mindset that games taught them. They believe in problem solving through experiential exploration. They understand that every choice has consequences, just as in role-playing games, and that the world has no single absolute answer. No one grows up solely because of games, but many have learned how to grow from the very games they played. One winter evening in 2004, thousands of players stood shoulder to shoulder in the Grand Hall of Stormwind in World of Warcraft. Gleaming armour, mythical mounts and flashy titles made that virtual gathering feel like a real festival. They were no longer simply playing a game. They were living in another world, one with its own history, economy, friendships, and even communal responsibilities. This was not just a simple game, but a parallel world, a second reality, where lines of code had become cities and data streams had become people. MMORPG, the gateway into a virtual reality. The acronym MMORPG, Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game, refers to online role-playing games supporting very large numbers of simultaneous players, typically in an open, persistent world with its own unfolding narrative. Here, you don't merely control a character, you become that character, build a life, choose a role, and contribute to the progress of the entire world. Games like Ultima Online 1997, EverQuest 1999, and especially World of Warcraft 2004 set the standard for this genre. In these worlds, you might be a warrior, a mage, a blacksmith, a cook, a merchant, an archaeologist, or even a wanderer surviving by hunting creatures. There is no single fixed objective, no single script, only the world itself and your choices within it. In such realms, towns function as if they were real. There are guilds, governance structures, trade, religions, conflicts and reconciliations. Major in-game events, like a large-scale war between two guilds or the appearance of a legendary boss, are recorded by the community as chapters in an epic saga. Veteran players may recount stories such as the year the corrupted blood plague spread, speaking of it as if recalling genuine historical memory. Real life, unfolding in the virtual world. Strangely, the longer players live in MMORPG worlds, the less fake those worlds feel. There have been couples who met in Final Fantasy XIV and held a real-world wedding. There are groups that organised real-life relief efforts thanks to bonds formed in Guild Wars 2. There have even been virtual funerals in EVE Online. where hundreds of players gathered in unarmed ships to mourn a player who had died in real life. The virtual world, gradually but steadily, becomes an extension of the real world, not to replace it but to expand it, where things impossible in real life, like flying among the stars or befriending someone across the globe, become more tangible than ever. In-game economies, virtual currency, virtual markets, real livelihoods. The vibrancy of MMORPG worlds is not only in communication and action, but also in economics. In EVE Online, the economy is entirely player-driven. Mining resources, manufacturing goods, transporting shipments, trading, and even speculating to manipulate markets. In World of Warcraft, the phenomenon of gold farming, playing to acquire in-game currency to sell for real money, became a global issue, sparking debates on digital labour, virtual property rights, and the value of effort in an intangible environment. A Vietnamese player might grind through the night to sell gear to someone in Europe. An unemployed person in China might earn a living by slaying bosses. A retired teacher in the US might spend pension money to purchase a flying dragon mount. All this shows that games are no longer just entertainment, but venues for genuine economic activity. Avatars, the digital self of the player. One of the most important concepts in virtual worlds is the avatar, the representation or character you control. In MMORPGs, an avatar is more than a mere puppet. It is an alternate identity, another version of yourself. An avatar's gender, race, appearance, and style may differ entirely from the player's real-life self. Yet in behaviour, dialogue style, and choices, it carries aspects of your psychology, emotions, and worldview. Sometimes people act more authentically through their avatars, saying things they wouldn't dare say in real life, forming relationships they wouldn't dare form, or expressing sides of themselves suppressed by real-world constraints. In these worlds, you are not bound by your personal history, geography, or social status. You rewrite yourself as you wish. Metaverse. The dream of a comprehensive second reality. The idea of a metaverse, a connected, living virtual world where people live, work, and socialise under a digital identity, is not new. From Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash 1992 to Ready Player One, this dream has spanned decades. Platforms like Second Life, VR Chat, Decentraland, or Meta's Horizon Worlds have realised parts of that vision. There you don't need objectives or levels. You simply exist, stroll around, converse, attend seminars, perform arts, teach classes, exhibit NFTs, or just sit quietly under a virtual tree, perhaps with a virtual friend without being disturbed. If fully realised, the metaverse would no longer be a game. It would be an alternative living environment where nations, businesses, schools, and even families coexist in their own ways. For those who grew up with online games, this is not mere fantasy, but an expected next step. But after all, we remain human. In any world. No matter how wondrous MMORPGs or metaverses become, what truly anchors people is not technology, graphics, or reward systems. What keeps them is the sense of connection, of being understood, and of coexisting with others. A virtual world truly lives when it has stories, memories, joys, losses, friendships, and forgiveness. When players gather and share tales of the first time we downed that raid boss, the day our guild disbanded, or the friend met in a dungeon, that world, though virtual, becomes real. Chapter 8. What is play? A philosophical journey. On the vast desert of human history, amid faint memories of a primordial existence, we glimpse the silhouette of a child flicking a pebble along furrowed sand. No rewards, no winners, just a repeated act, a small joy in long days of survival. In that simple moment, play is born, without anyone inventing it or granting permission. It appears as an instinct for existence, like a second breath of humanity. We have come far from that pebble flicking, through Roman gambling, Persian chess, Las Vegas casinos, arcade machines, NES consoles, to the virtual worlds of the metaverse. Yet the question remains, silently echoing through time: what is play? And more deeply, why do humans play? Play is a primitive behaviour. Many scholars argue that play is not a product of culture, but predates culture itself. Children play even without being taught. Tigers, dolphins, even crows and octopuses play, chasing, flipping shells, or feigning attack then retreating. As Dutch philosopher Johan Huizinga wrote in Homo Ludens, 1938, humans are not only Homo sapiens, thinking beings, but also Homo Ludens, playing beings. Play is how creatures learn, experiment, gauge risk, and understand their own limits and those of the world. No one teaches a tiger cub how to stalk prey. It learns by toying with a shadow or a leaf. No one instructs a child in negotiation. They learn by playing shop with friends. In play, the boundary between real and pretend is temporarily suspended. This world is not for living, but for trying out living. Play as a rule-based structure, yet freedom in the mind. A game can have complex rules, specific goals, even clear penalties. Yet what keeps the player engaged is not the reward, but the bounded freedom the game provides. French sociologist Roger Caillois categorized play into four main types: agon, competition; sports, chess, competitive games; alia, chance; dice games, roulette, poker; mimicry, role play; dressing up, acting, simulation games; eye links, vertigo, thrill; spinning rides, hopscotch, VR experiences. In each category, the player temporarily sets aside their real-life role to enter another space, where actions may seem meaningless, yet meaning arises from the choice to participate. Play not to win, but to understand oneself. A child builds a sandcastle, fully aware the waves will wash it away, but still builds. A Sims player may spend hours designing a kitchen. A Dark Souls player accepts hundreds of defeats just to feel that fleeting moment of victory. The common thread: play is measured not by outcomes, but by the journey. In that journey, one discovers personal patience, tendencies to help or hinder, likes and fears. Play becomes a mirror of the spirit, where no one forces you to reveal your nature, but nothing prevents you from doing so either. The blurred boundary between playing and living. As games grow more realistic and entwined with life, the line between playing a game and living within a game fades. An Animal Crossing player doesn't feel they are merely playing. They are planting trees, admiring flowers, visiting friends, taking commemorative screenshots, much like someone on a leisurely retreat. A Death Stranding player doesn't just deliver cargo, they connect people by building virtual structures, as if each bridge they construct is an act of genuine compassion. In the digital age, play becomes a purposeful way of living, choosing to do something seemingly pointless because it gives life meaning. Religion, festivals, theatre, all contain elements of play. When entering a theatre, we know we watch a staged performance. When joining a masquerade or festival, we know everyone is playing a role, yet that does not make the emotions any less real. Similarly, when entering a game, we know everything is simulated, but we can still laugh genuinely, feel real anger, shed genuine tears. Play is not deception. It is a space for sincerity that the real world often cannot permit. In play, we may lose, die, or go bankrupt, and face no real punishment. That safety allows us to access emotions and experiences that real life often makes us cautious to approach. If play is necessary, then playing games is more necessary than ever in the modern world, where work, pressure, social media, news weigh heavily. Video games are no longer mere time killers. They offer a silent pause to breathe, dream, recover, and renew ourselves. When you play Stardew Valley after a tiring day, No one says you are avoiding reality. You create a temporary reality, one you control, where crops grow if you water them, where everything follows its own internal logic, and where you need not prove anything to anyone. When you play Tetris, you need no dialogue or story, just falling blocks and a steady heartbeat. Conclusion: play as a reminder of human freedom. In a world where everything has a purpose, every moment is optimized and every action is judged, play persists as a voluntary act, needing no reason, no justification. And precisely because it is irrational, it is beautiful. Precisely because it is purposeless, it is precious. Precisely because we do not need to play, yet we still play stands as a declaration of freedom. On the vast desert of human history, amid faint memories of a primordial existence, we glimpse the silhouette of a child flicking a pebble along furrowed sand. No rewards, no winners. Just a repeated act, a small joy in long days of survival. In that simple moment, play is born, without anyone inventing it or granting permission. It appears as an instinct for existence, like a second breath of humanity. We have come far from that pebble flicking, through Roman gambling, Persian chess, Las Vegas casinos, arcade machines, NES consoles, to the virtual worlds of the metaverse. Yet the question remains, silently echoing through time: what is play? And more deeply, why do humans play? Socrates and Plato. Play as part of the education of the soul. Since ancient Greece, philosophers noted the moral and intellectual value of play. Plato wrote, "You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation." He believed children should learn through play. In the Republic, he proposes that music, athletics, and games be central to educating the guardians of the city. For him, play is not escapism, but a form of moral and intellectual training. Socrates, Plato's teacher, saw play as where people begin to question. In his philosophical dialogues, he does not lecture like a teacher, but leads interlocutors through intellectual games, posing suggestions, challenging assumptions, asking questions, and dismantling premises, until the interlocutor must reflect on themselves. Aristotle and the joy of reason. Unlike Plato, Aristotle considered play an essential component of human flourishing, eudaimonia. As a rational animal, humans express intellect through free activity. In the Nicomachean Ethics, he distinguishes between goal-directed activities, praxis, and activities valued for their own sake, theoria. Play, like music or poetry, needs no external purpose. It exists for its own sake. Thus, it is a sign of a complete life. Schiller. Play is the bridge between body and spirit. The poet-philosopher Friedrich Schiller wrote in his Letters on the Aesthetic Education of Man, 1795, "Only through play does man fully become human." He argues that in the state of play, people are freed from survival instincts or social pressures. In play, we are neither purely body nor purely reason, but the union of both, free and creative. For Schiller, play is not merely an activity, but the supreme mental state, where one touches both beauty and freedom simultaneously. Huizinga. Play is the foundation of civilization. Dutch historian Johan Huizinga argued in Homo Ludens, 1938, civilization arises in and as play. He observed that every culture begins with ritualized forms of play. Religious ceremonies, legal codes, mock battles, arts, poetry, theatre, all structured like games. According to Huizinga, play has 5 characteristics: voluntary, no one is forced; separated, bounded in time and space; non-utilitarian, intrinsic value; rule-governed, rules accepted by participants; creates its own world, a realm of imagination and agreed laws. If civilization springs from rules and symbols, play is humanity's first laboratory where these concepts are tested and embraced. Freud and Jung. Play as a mirror of the unconscious. Sigmund Freud, father of psychoanalysis, saw children's play as a way the unconscious works through conflicts and anxieties. When a child pretends to be a doctor or invents scenarios, e.g. a sick doll, they reenact internal tensions to learn control. Carl Jung went further. Play and its symbols reflect archetypes in the collective unconscious. An adventure game may mirror the hero's journey. A horror game may reflect the shadow repressed in societal psyche. Thus, play is not mere entertainment, but an expression of hidden spiritual processes. Piaget and Vygotsky play as children's way to build cognition and society. Jean Piaget, Swiss psychologist, saw play as how children construct concepts of the world. Play reflects stages of cognitive development: sensory motor play, symbolic play, rule-governed play. Lev Vygotsky, Russian psychologist, emphasized the social role of play. Through play, children not only express themselves but learn interaction, rule-following, and negotiation with others. Both agree, play is the first school of intellect and community. Play in modern education, paideia and ludus. Two ancient Greek terms describe learning modes often linked to play. Paideia, free, creative play without strict rules, e.g. Lego, drawing, sandbox games. Ludus, structured play with clear rules, teaching specific skills, e.g. solving puzzles, chess, competitive esports. Combining both yields an ideal education, inspiring exploration while training capabilities. In games, Minecraft exemplifies paideia, Portal exemplifies ludus, and titles like Zelda blend both. Players, by adjusting their own approach, are essentially learning how to learn. Existentialist philosophy and play. Camus, Sartre, Kierkegaard. Albert Camus wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy. If life is a sequence of seemingly meaningless actions, like Sisyphus rolling his boulder, then choosing to act anyway becomes a silent, proud act of rebellion. In that sense, play is an affirmation of personal meaning in an absurd world." Jean-Paul Sartre argued humans have no fixed essence, but are the sum of their choices. In role-playing games, each action carries consequences, and the player becomes who they choose to be. Søren Kierkegaard wrote of the despair of the self that cannot be itself, a feeling familiar in games offering unlimited possibilities, yet leaving one feeling lost. Then one must ask, am I playing freely, or am I being led? Conclusion: play is the language of thought. Across centuries of philosophy, psychology, and sociology, play has never been dismissed. Rather, it remains a persistent, profound subject because it touches the core of humanity. Play is freedom. Play is learning. Play is reflection. Play is connection. Play is trial and error. Play is symbol. Play is not simply entertainment for children, but the most primordial and profound language humans have created to understand themselves and the world. On a quiet night in the near future, a young person places a VR headset onto their head. The world around them vanishes, replaced by a strange scene, an endless field bathed in gentle moonlight where each footstep produces its own musical note. No objectives, no scores, no one else, unless they choose company. Just a space to live, to feel, to exist. As games evolve to fully integrate with sensation and consciousness, the ultimate question arises: when does a game cease to be a game? And more deeply, might gaming become a way of life, a mode of existence, an alternative reality? From screen to sensation, interfaces dissolve, consciousness expands. Technological advances have pushed games beyond the constraints of controllers, mice, and keyboards. Now the gaming experience is delivered directly through vision, VR/AR headsets with near photoreal resolution and eye tracking. Hearing, three-dimensional audio reproducing spatial detail down to each rustle of wind. Touch, force feedback gloves, garments that vibrate in sync with your virtual heartbeat. Smell and taste, experimental. Sensing the scent of rain-soaked earth or the aroma of a dish you've cooked in game. With neural interface prototypes, players can control and react by pure thought. No button press required, only the intent. When the boundary between thought and action blurs, the entire game world becomes an extension of the mind. Games that adapt and self-generate, AI and on the fly. Future games will no longer rely on pre-written scripts or pre-programmed characters. With AI-driven content generation, every playthrough can be a different world, a new journey, a unique soundtrack, crafted by AI that feels your mood. Feeling down? The game opens with a soothing environment and a comforting companion. Craving adventure? It builds a dungeon, challenging foes, psychologically complex adversaries. Seeking romance? It weaves an encounter, not by fixed narrative, but aligned with emotions you might not even have realized you wanted. AI in games becomes not just a tool, but a collaborator, writing alongside you, thinking with you, playing with you. A virtual character might recall conversations from 3 years ago, repeat a phrase you once liked, and gently ask why you haven't sung lately. Virtual worlds, from auxiliary spaces to primary reality. With the growth of the metaverse, the Internet of Presence and blockchain, game worlds may transform into workplaces, meetings held in a virtual castle, design carried out in simulated environments. Schools, learning history by living in an ancient era simulation. Places for romance, dating in a floating city, sending digital flowers that still carry a scent. Creative studios, becoming a musician, architect, or director. Without formal training, guided by emotion and ideas alone, games cease to be just part of life. They become where life continues in another form. Many born into this era will not distinguish real world from game, since both feel equally real in their own ways. Games as ethical and social platforms. In the future, games will not only let us experiment with behaviour, but also serve as rehearsal grounds for moral choices. In a war simulation, you might choose not to kill an enemy, even when it is easy. In a survival scenario, you decide whether to share or hoard the last resource. Such actions are recorded, analysed, reflected upon, and potentially used to build psychological profiles for medicine, education, or even hiring. Virtual worlds could model ideal societies, allowing people to test forms of democracy, communal structures, or legal systems, before applying them in reality. A social system could be trialled in a 100-year simulation within a few hours. In this way, games become ethical, political, and cultural laboratories for humanity. One day, games may replace memory. With technologies for memory storage, dream simulation, and mixed reality, games would no longer serve merely as entertainment. Instead, they become repositories of lost memories, reuniting with loved ones via machine-learned avatars, continuations of unfinished dreams, living within a world you've created, carrying on where reality ended. Spaces to re-choose yourself, becoming someone you never dared to dream of being. Then games won't just be new experiences, they replace the passing reality itself. We won't recall the past solely through photos, but relive it. Each touch, each spoken word, each final embrace. Who creates games? Or will games create themselves? With sufficiently powerful AI, open game systems, and players rich in imagination, future games might generate themselves from your narrative, adjust in real time to unspoken emotions, conclude when they sense you've grasped what you needed to understand. At that point, there are no developers, only people living within experiences, and a system responding with compassionate intelligence. You mentioned once fearing the dark. The game builds a corridor with no light but silently places a glowing cat by your side, never leaving you. You don't say, "I feel lonely," but the game knows, and leaves beside you a companion who always asks, "How are you feeling today?" If games are the future, are we still players? When games become smarter than us, understand us better than we understand ourselves, create everything for us, do we remain players or become the played? There is no easy answer, but one thing is certain. No matter how far games advance, humans remain at their centre. Not because we control them, but because we feel. Not because we build them, but because we dream. And dreaming, from the dawn of humanity to the furthest future, is something that cannot be fully programmed. Chapter 9. From the first game to the last game. The endless journey of the player. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you stand in a timeless room. On the walls are ochre drawings of prehistoric people chasing one another across grasslands. Beside them, a carving depicts a stone board game from Mesopotamia, torchlight flickering on ancient walls. Far off in the darkness, you see an arcade machine from the 1980s, glowing faintly, and a boy playing Pac-Man, his face rapt as if this is the only magic left in the world. In the centre of that room, something strange happens. Every game from antiquity to the present, all the spinning tops, pebble games, Go boards up to PlayStation 12, the metaverse, and even games yet to be invented, seem to merge into one, silently existing like an underground river flowing through human history. For one thing has never changed. People always play, and they will always need to play. The first flame, when play was ritual. In the rough lands of the Stone Age, before writing, money, or measures existed, people already played. A stone thrown across a line, a branch turned into a stick, a patch of earth becoming a field. All were seeds of the earliest forms of play. No one won, no one lost. There was only laughter, and through that laughter people realised they were alive, not merely surviving, but experiencing their own presence in the world. They may not have called it play. They called it festival, ritual, or dream. Yet in its essence, they were doing what every subsequent generation repeats, taking time to step out of reality and enter a world whose rules they could create. From toys to thought, when children invent worlds, no one teaches a child how to play. They look around, grab a spoon, imagine it as a sword. They crawl over a sofa as if scaling a mountain. They invent stories, roles, and thousands of unspoken rules that adults cannot fully grasp. Play is a child's first language. Before speaking, they know imagination. Through imagination, they explore the world not by theory, but by experience. From children's small worlds, adults have borrowed much. Rules, playgrounds, puzzles, even entire philosophies. When Aristotle speaks of activity for its own sake, when Kant speaks of purpose without an end, both echo a truth. Play is the silent foundation of philosophical thought. When play becomes the language of an era, entering the modern age, when industry and technology exploded and people became lost amid numbers, charts, production systems, and endless streams of information, life felt suffocated by goals and efficiency. Then play returned, not as nostalgia, but as subtle resistance. Video games exploded not merely because of technology, but because of humanity's deepest need, to master one's own experience. In real life, you cannot choose your past. In a game, you can load game. In real life, you are judged by mistakes. In a game, you can try again. In real life, death is final. In a game, it is merely a save point. Players are not escaping reality. They are creating a reality they can understand, accept, and restart at will. Beyond entertainment, play as a mode of living. In recent years, the boundary between games and life has nearly vanished. You can earn a degree in a virtual world. You can build a home, attend a garden, fall in love and explore, all within a game. You can be healed by a simple game like Journey, understand history through Valiant Hearts, or feel first love in a Japanese visual novel. Games have become the most profound storytelling form of the 21st century because they don't merely recount stories but let you live within them. They don't tell you what to feel, they provide the conditions and let you discover your own emotions. And one day, when no one is left to tell stories, there will still be players to remember. When humanity ventures into the stars, when this planet remains only a memory, and when all books have turned to dust, perhaps a game stored on an old drive will still exist, and somewhere in another world, a child may find it, without knowing what it is, but will plug it into a device and begin to play. In that moment, the game is reborn, not because of its content or objectives, but because the unbroken impulse to play continues, a force that has defined humanity from the very beginning. When you step into a virtual world, where rolling hills stretch out endlessly, a city glimmers beneath a violet sunset, or a spaceship drifts through a silent galaxy, do you ever pause and wonder, who laid that first brick? Who thought to place a cat on the rooftop watching you? Who chose to soften the soundtrack when it rains? The answer does not lie in lines of code, design documents, or sprint meetings. It lies in the soul of the game creator, those who harbour a curious belief that a game can make you laugh, cry, and even change the way you see the world. In this section, we step beyond the screen, past polygons and physics engines, to look deeply at the people behind the display. People who never appear in the game itself, yet are present in every detail you experience. The modern storyteller. Since ancient times, humanity has had storytellers, poets, bards, shamans. Today they go by new names: game designers, narrative writers, level artists, composers. Shigeru Miyamoto, the father of Mario and Zelda, once said, "I don't make games so players feel better than someone else. I make games so they feel joy in being themselves." In that simple phrase lies a profound philosophy. Games are not instruments of measurement, but doors for people to explore themselves. And the one who opens that door is the game creator, the programmer who crafts dreams from code. On the technical layer, programmers toil over every line of code so that a tree sways in the wind, a droplet clings after the rain, or a protagonist's eyes flash as they stand on a precipice. No one praises them by name, yet thanks to them, a world can run smoothly at 60 frames per second, without errors or glitches. They are architects of virtual reality, needing no camera lens, yet making you forget you sit before a screen. The writer for unreal beings, yet true emotions. Within game studios, some people spend entire months crafting a single line of dialogue for an NPC that the player may hear only once. They understand that a world only lives when its inhabitants possess depth. A character that appears for just 5 minutes still has a childhood, preferences, flaws, and dreams. Perhaps the player won't notice, but if they do, that moment will stay with them. These writers do not tell a story from A to Z. They create gaps for players to fill with their own feelings and imagination. The artist painting light, curves, and silence. They are more than 3D modelers or texture artists. They translate emotion into visuals. A beam of light from a window lighting a corner, a smear of blood on a letter, the sky shifting from orange to grey, all are intentional. Players might not identify each detail consciously, but they feel them. That is the difference between a world that lives and a world that merely exists to be traversed. The composer, guiding you to memories never lived. Some melodies move you to tears the first time you hear them, not because they recall something, but because they evoke something you never knew you'd lost. Music in games is not mere background. It is the emotion underpinning every action. You may not remember every scene in Final Fantasy, but you recall Aerith's theme. You might forget all the maps in Skyrim, yet the gentle strings still linger, like a lullaby from a distant land. Somewhere, someone stayed up through the night, tweaking every note so it matches the heartbeat of a moment you've never lived. But when you hear it, it feels as if it has always been part of your life. The testers and bug finders. No one knows by name. They are QA testers, debuggers, support teams. No one mentions them in award ceremonies. Yet thanks to them, you don't fall out of the map, get stuck in walls, or crash at the very last second. They play the game not for fun, but to make it fun for others. They are the first and last players before the game reaches you. Why do they do it? Because they believe in what you have yet to see. All game creators, from directors to interns, work for a common reason: the belief that an imaginary world can touch a real heart. They don't know who you are or when you will play, but they know that somewhere, someone will open their game and feel less alone. The game creator, sowing humanity's seed into virtual worlds. No one knows who created the very first game. Perhaps an unnamed child in ancient Mesopotamia. But one thing is certain: that seed has grown in millions of people since. People who never stop imagining, creating, and sharing. If writers use words to craft life stories, game creators use rules, interactions, and emotions to awaken human nature, often without the player ever realizing they are being guided. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in a timeless room. On the walls are ochre drawings of prehistoric people chasing each other across grasslands. Nearby, a carving shows a stone board game in Mesopotamia, torchlight flickering on ancient walls. Far off in the darkness, you see an arcade machine from the 1980s glowing faintly, and a boy playing Pac-Man, his face enraptured, as if this is the only magic left in the world. In the centre of that room, something strange happens. Every game from ancient times to now, all spinning tops, pebble games, go boards, up through PlayStation 12, the metaverse, and even games not yet invented, seem to merge into one, quietly present like an underground river flowing through human history. For one thing has never changed: people always play, and they always will need to play. The first spark, when play, was ritual. In the rough lands of the Stone Age, before writing, money or measured units existed, people already played. A stone thrown across a line, a branch turned into a stick, a patch of earth becoming a field. These were the seeds of the earliest forms of play. No one won, no one lost. There was only laughter. Through that laughter, people recognized they were alive, not merely surviving, but experiencing their presence in the world. They may not have called it play, they called it festival, ritual, or dream. Yet in essence, they were doing what every subsequent generation repeats, taking time to step out of reality and enter a world whose rules they create. From toys to thought, when children invent worlds, no one teaches a child how to play. They look around, grab a spoon, imagine it as a sword. They crawl over a sofa as if scaling a mountain. They invent stories, roles, and thousands of unspoken rules adults cannot fully grasp. Play is a child's first language. Before speaking, they know imagination. Through imagination, they explore the world not by theory, but through experience. From these small worlds of children, adults have borrowed much. Rules, playgrounds, challenges, even entire philosophies. When Aristotle speaks of activity for its own sake, or Kant of ends in themselves, both echo a truth. Play is the silent foundation of philosophical thought. When play becomes the language of an era, entering the modern age, when industry and technology exploded and people became lost amid numbers, charts, production systems, and endless information flows, life felt suffocated by goals and efficiency. Then play returned, not as nostalgia, but as subtle resistance. Video games didn't boom solely because of technology. They boomed because of humanity's deepest need, to master one's own experience. In real life, you cannot choose your past. In a game, you can load game. In real life, you are judged by mistakes. In a game, you can try again. In real life, death is final. In a game, it is merely a checkpoint. Players are not escaping reality. They are creating a reality they can understand, accept, and restart at will. Beyond entertainment, play is a way of living. In recent years, the boundary between games and life has nearly vanished. You can earn a degree in a virtual world. You can build a home, tend a garden, fall in love, explore, all within a game. You can be healed by a simple game like Journey, understand history through Valiant Hearts, or feel first love in a Japanese visual novel. Games have become the most profound storytelling form of the 21st century because they don't merely recount stories but let you live within them. They don't tell you what to feel, they provide the conditions and let you discover your own emotions. And one day, when no one is left to tell stories, players remain to remember. When humanity ventures into the stars, when this planet remains only a memory, and when all books have turned to dust, perhaps a game stored on an old drive will still exist. And somewhere in another world, a child may find it without knowing what it is, but will plug it into a device and begin to play. In that moment, the game is reborn, not because of its content or objectives, but because the unbroken impulse to play continues. A force that has defined humanity from the very beginning. If life were a game, which level are you on? If life is a game, which level are you on? There is no pause button. Life, unlike video games, has no save. You cannot go back to last Tuesday morning and choose option B instead of A. You cannot load checkpoint before uttering words you shouldn't. There is no game over screen offering retry. And precisely because of that, every choice you make is real. Every step, every decision, every word, every silence. All are actions in one unique game. The game of existence. There is no score, but there are consequences. No final boss clearly defined. But personal fears exist. No predetermined map, but a compass in your heart. No explicit guide. But memory, intuition, and companions. You are both a player and an NPC in others' games. You may be the protagonist of your own story, but also someone passing briefly through another's journey. A stranger's smile, a helping hand, or a word they remember forever. The game of life is an MMO, billions present, affecting each other, yet none know the full story. That makes it chaotic, but also beautiful. In games, you rarely know the impact you have on someone else, yet you play and still influence. There is no true ending, only a journey continuously adjusting. Many games have a true ending, unlocked only by fulfilling specific conditions, uncovering secrets, making the right choice. Life is not like that. There is no classic true ending, no triumphant end credits, no stat summary. Sometimes the ending arrives quietly on a rainy afternoon, when you sit alone and wonder, have I lived authentically? Perhaps that is when you realise each day is a new play and you cannot win, but you can progress further. Play to understand, play to forgive, play to continue. All games, simple or complex, sad or joyful, share one thing. The player must move forward. When you fail, you play again. When you don't know the rules, you learn gradually. When you meet others, you cooperate or compete, then learn forgiveness. Likewise in life, you cannot choose the cards dealt to you, but you choose how to play. You may rage or persevere. You may give up or continue, without anyone demanding it. And if you play long enough, you realise play is not to win, but to understand. Understand yourself, understand others, understand that playing itself is the reward. The final memory of a player. There is an old story. An elder lies on a sickbed, eyes distant. Family asks, "What do you remember most in your life?" He doesn't speak of career or property. He smiles softly and says, "Once I played spaceship in a cardboard box with my grandchild. We sat in the box pretending to be astronauts. It was raining, and we flew to Mars. No one knows how far he truly flew, but he remembers. For him, that was a game, and the moment he truly lived. So, which level are you on? No one knows. Maybe you're in the tutorial, learning to love yourself. Maybe you're in a quiet section, awaiting the climax. Maybe you're in the middle of a boss battle, tired, desperate, but not yet giving up. Or maybe you're at the final level without realizing it. However it is, there remains one button you always hold: the continue button. In this game, you are not eliminated. No one loses completely, and no one is unworthy of playing on. Closing words. A game that needs no end. We began this journey in Mesopotamia, traversed ritual games, educational games, computer games, digital games, future games, and now close with the eternal game in the human heart. A game needs no clear rules, no explanation, no reward. A game begins with the first laughter and lasts until the very last tear. If someone asks, what is its name? Answer gently, its name is life. The end. Thank you for joining me on this long, quiet, and sometimes too lengthy journey for a sleepy evening. But if somewhere in these chapters you smiled inwardly or felt a lightness in your heart, perhaps we have just played a small game together, and we have already won, haven't we?